these times they are uncertain, of that there is no doubt. Nobody can tell me quite what it's all about. The heartbreak and the loneliness, the chaos and the fear will make even the strongest cry. I wish my ma was here. A young man on a battlefield fights for a rich man's gold. The bullet cracks into his spine, he knows he won't grow. And as the tears come streaming down, at once his mind goes clear. The war was fought for nothing, he cries, I wish my ma was here. A lively story well in hand, a joke to soothe your soul. When it came to arguing, she'd forgive and let it go. When I cried, she held me, told me it's okay, my dear. And as we face these darkened days, I wish my ma was here. And as we march into the streets, as all the righteous do, we'll raise our voices to the skies. They cannot stop the truth. And as we tear their structures down, we'll raise a victory cheer. We made the world a better place, and I wish my ma was here. Yeah, we made the world a better place. I wish my ma was here. Woke CIA drone pilot over on Twitch. How are you doing today, my man? Peanut Butter Beatrice, Eggs D. Good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. For those of you who are just listening in at home, I am talking to my Twitch stream and my YouTube stream. If you would like to participate, I live stream 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays. Please come on down. And if you'd like to donate, you can find me patreon.com/thecanadiancommie. Speaking of donations, Baldy McNosehair in with a $5 donation. Good to see you guys. I've been away for a little while due to sickness and then due to getting out of the city for a little while. And is anything going on? Is anything going on, guys? Is anything new happening? Anything new happening? I mean, the story, and there's no reason to be facetious or silly about it, is straight up Iran's bombing Israel. Right? Iran's bombing Israel. That's an escalation. Woke CIA drone pilot says, I am in the middle of another 10-hour blackout. I'm so sorry to hear that, Woke. Things could be better, but Iran and the Canadian commie are making a good day. Well, that's kind of you to say. I appreciate that. I don't know what to think about what's going on. My concern, of course, is that this is going to lead to escalation. And the United States does not have a history of backing down. The GOAT popping in on the feed. Not a frequent live viewer, but I listen to all your replays. Great work, and I'm glad I could be here today. Well, the GOAT, that's kind to hear. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Juan, good to see you. Iran has every right to defend itself. The American propaganda machine has been off the charts today. I mean, it's just lunacy now, right? Like at this stage in the game, like if you're going to buy into what we're going to go into propaganda right here, right? This is a Wall Street Journal article, and as we've been exploring the propaganda, and as we have been exploring the ridiculousness, it has just been getting more and more silly. It's just been getting sillier. That you really do have to be bought in on the same level as like a cult, right? Your mega people and your blue mega people are the only people who are going to buy into this stuff anymore, right? And it makes sense that a country that still holds on to the idea that, you know, a man is coming back from the clouds at any moment would buy into any of this stuff. But it is like that's my big takeaway, is just how silly so much of this stuff is, and how just like gobsmackingly ridiculous. Like, I find myself so often just saying, like, couldn't we just not do any of this? Couldn't we just like not? Like, why is it so important that we do this stuff? Why is it so important that we meddle in other people's countries and bomb them and overthrow them? Like, what are we actually gaining? And it usually just comes down to like, oh yeah, one guy gets a little bit more money this year. It's just the dumbest thing you've ever seen in your life. And I don't understand why we're doing it, and why we're still tolerating it, and why we're still going along with it. Some people aren't, right? A sort of B-tier story that's going on is the port strike, which has the potential to completely shut America down, right? The dock workers are actually going on strike. I have an article here we'll be reading a bit later. And it is madness upon madness that what it finally is going to have to be people taking to the streets, surrounding the halls of power, and essentially saying, we don't care about your one donator. We don't care about the three people who are making money and who have control of all the wealth. We don't care. Stop doing what you're doing. We're not going to participate. And it's our lack of participation that is going to actually grind this thing down to a halt. Woke CIA drone pilot, of course, says dock workers said they'd guarantee military shipments. Oh, perfect. Yeah, oh, perfect. Joe, good to see you. Power junkies. Yeah. I mean, it's beyond, like, to even say power anymore. Like, it's something else. It's just this, like, self-adulation to the highest possible level. It's not even about power anymore, right? Because if it was actually about power, right? If it was actually about power, anybody with a brain in their head would be like, oh yeah, we're going to lose a whole lot of power. Like, we're going to lose a ton of power. We're going to funnel all of our money and all of our wealth and all of our productivity into an endless war that goes nowhere. That's just a dead end. Complete just black hole of just funneling all of our wealth and all of our prosperity and everything we have into this dark, bleak, black hole of empty nothingness. That's not a power play, right? From a power perspective, what's going on in the Middle East and what the Americans are doing is deeply foolish. Deeply, deeply foolish. That I'm a big believer that people are only really motivated by three things. There's only three core motivators, right? Power, vengeance, and love. And what I think we're looking at is a type of twisted, distorted love. Because it's the love of the self, right? It's just, can I shoot rockets up into space and have a P. Diddy harem, right? It's this just desire to jerk off as often as possible, basically. Like, what we are looking at is a form of just masturbation at this point. Because it's just, instead of actually saying, hey, we can funnel all of this wealth into anything worthwhile, any kind of institution, anything that would help literally anybody else who's currently living, let alone people who are not. Instead of that, it's just, how many more prostitutes can I have sex with? What kind of joyride can I have? What kind of ridiculous, absurdist project can I embark on in order to claim a piece of territory in space? It's all just this expansionist settler colonial mind that is just completely warping what we're doing. And so I don't think, like, I think that you can explain things theoretically through the lens of power politics and all of that, but I don't, at the core, at the foundation of everything, I don't think that what we're looking at has anything to do with power. Because a person who is actually thinking about the world from the position of power politics would never do this stuff. All you're going to do is blow up all your power. You're going to take all the wealth you have and just blow it up for nothing. Clearly. And we're hell-bent on that path. That's why I'll say over and over and over again, and I will continue to defend this position. And I will continue to remind people to think about it this way, and I'll continue talking about it this way. What we're looking at is a religion. It's a religion first and foremost. It's not anything other than a ideology and a religion. Omnicidal Tendencies, good to see you. Omnicidal Tendency says, there's no revolutionary change potential in the first world. The material conditions don't meet the requirements. I mean, things have not... How to say this as succinctly as possible. Like, people still believe we can right the ship. I think that's really what it is. People still think that, like, oh yeah, we'll go on strike, we'll get our concessions, and then that'll right the ship. And we'll just carry on. And so there's this kind of layer of delusion that exists, where people still actually think the system can be salvaged through liberalism. And they're wrong. Right? And they're going to learn that lesson. We're going to learn that lesson really the hard way. It looks like. Right? And this is what happens when you launch a McCarthy era, right? Cleanse your society of anybody who's actually, like, reading theory, who's actually attempting to think about society in an actual theoretical method. And when you cleanse your society of all of that and then just promote kind of a banal, essentially fascist dogma that you call neoliberalism, what do you end up with? Right? And then when you end up with people who are like, wait a minute, I'm working a full-time job plus overtime and I can't even pay my rent. I know what, we'll go on strike and ask for 0.5% improvement over 30 years, and that'll fix it. Like, there's just not a lot of these guys are going to go on strike, and a lot of these guys are going to go through this huge hoopla and unionize and do all this kind of stuff, and then end up basically where they started, and then be like, what's going on? I don't understand. Right? Cotton says, Shapiro, by the way, good to see you, Cotton. Shapiro needs to just shut up. He's such a dishwater twerp. I mean, he's a fascist. Like, that's all. Like, and even worse than that now, he's a fascist in a society where the internal logic, the driving force of the fascism is gone. Like, it's just incoherent nonsense now, right? And so all they really have left is Kamala bad, and as if Kamala and Trump are, or if the Democrats and the Republicans are actually enemies, and so it's just incoherence all the way down, right? And I mean, Shapiro is the king of incoherence because he thinks that a magic book that was written by God told everybody how to live their lives, and he doesn't even follow it. Omnicidal writes, I highly doubt it. As long as the masses get concessions, they could care less as long as it doesn't inconvenience them. Yeah, but I think my point, Omnicidal, is that the concessions they're going to get and that they think are going to be like, this is the thing, this is going to help me, they're going to do nothing, right? Like, oh, sweet, we got a 5% improvement over 2 years. Okay, cool, inflation went up 5% over 2 years, right? So they're going to end up right back where they started, and a couple of them at least are going to start going, hold on a moment. Like, what are you even talking about? And that's what we're doing, right? We're building consciousness. We're building awareness. We're building more and more people as generations continue to open and as everything continues to open. There's a growth. And there is a growth. There is a awakening. There is a consciousness awakening that's happening. Just the very fact that these strikes are even happening is a consciousness awakening. It's just that they're happening by liberals. And so you've got a bunch of liberals that are like, yeah, we'll show them. We'll get our 0.5% over 5 years. That'll show them, right? Yeah, we did it. And then they'll all pop champagne corks and be like, yeah, we got a victory. And then in 5-10 years, everybody will look around and be like, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. That strike did nothing because it wasn't done along actual communist or socialist lines. It was completely done along liberal lines, which is always like, just accept the incremental piecemeal reformism, and that's how you change the system, which there's literally no evidence of that. Every single time anything has changed, it's because there's been thousands and thousands of people outside the halls of power being like, do this, or we'll just walk in there. Joe writes, Ben Shapiro should not be taken seriously at any level aside from the influence he may have on his listeners. Yeah. I mean, he's just a, the only people who are bigger losers than Shapiro are the people who listen to Shapiro. Like, just stop listening to this guy. Like, when has he ever been right about anything? Like, that's my big thing. Like, he's just always wrong, and he's stupid. He's a deeply, deeply stupid person. So I don't know why you would want to spend any time listening to somebody who's consistently wrong and consistently stupid. No, YouTube doing its thing. Yeah, shadow modding, enthusiastic support for port workers. Yeah, exactly. We got some censorship happening in the YouTube chat. Yeah, that's a good way to build a community right there. Let's make sure everything's censored. Monsieur, good to see you. Woke, I'm not going to read that comment, but I agree. XD writes, Kamala, more like it, but he spelt it. It didn't translate. Communist. Kamala. Fuck it. Yeah, there's no fixing the system as is. You mean you can't fix a system that was designed by monarchs and slavers in order to maintain monarchy and slavery? You can't fix that through incremental piecemeal reformism? Huh. Generation Y me, good to see you, man. The system working as intended. Yeah, you bet. The Goat writes, we're about to elect a climate denier transphobe friend of Jordan Peterson as BC Premier, and David Eby is caving to right-wing NIMBYs on drug criminalization, so even if the NDP wins, it's shit. Yeah, we need help. Well, the issue, of course, really does boil down to, like, it's just cultural, right? It is just cultural. We are, like, if nobody voted for these guys, or if there was no support for any of this, then they would have nothing, right? So it is about reaching out. It is about changing hearts and minds. It is about saying to these people, like, hey, maybe enslaving yourself to a system that's actively trying to kill you is a bad idea, right? Maybe it would be better if you actually had a say of how things happened in your workplace. Maybe it would be better for you. But people are, it's so wild that the people who are most, like, who want to work hardest for their owners, like Elon Musk, are the people who are screaming about freedom. Like, I just don't think they have any idea what they're talking about. Well, yeah. Peanut Butter Beatrice says that headline is hurting my brain. You're referring, of course, to the Wall Street Journal. Israel defends itself and may save Western civilization. This was published yesterday, so just before the attack happened. The equivocation of Biden, Harris, and other leaders should cause us all to feel a degree of shame. This is written by Gerard Baker. Always good to see Nazi apologencia in the Wall Street Journal. It's become so common now. Like, the Wall Street Journal, should there be a revolution, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal should go to the heck, right? And I don't think that's even a controversial statement to make. I think that these people are war criminals, propagandists, on the same level as Goebbels, and not too much different, right? Not too much different. Jeff, good to see you. Azron, good to see you too. Jeff reminds us, please don't forget to hit that like, share, subscribe button. Join the Patreon. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So I'm going to read this one. And I hope it doesn't hurt me. Probably will, though. How will we ever repay the debt we owe to Israel? What a phenomenal start. What a phenomenal start. Guys, hold on. I never thought about it. How will we ever repay the debt we owe to Israel? Israel's existence, Jeff straight up just vomit emojis. Yeah. Israel exists as essentially a vassal or a surrogate to Western powers. If it wasn't for Western powers, like Britain, like the United States, Israel would not exist. The idea that we owe a debt to Israel, I'd like to hear how it. If anybody owes a debt to anybody, it's Israel that owes a debt to us, for sure. For sure, especially because we keep giving them billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars and weapons. Like, they have a free healthcare system and a free education system because of us. What debt? What debt? Here we go. What the Jewish state has done in the past year for its own defense, but in the process, and not coincidentally, for the security of all of us, big question mark there, will rank among the most important contributions to the defense of Western civilization in the past 3/4 of a century. So this is just straight up, like, Nazi propaganda, right? Like, this is straight up, like, Lebensstrom. Like, this is just straight up, like, it's gonna happen, guys. What have I been saying this whole time? Like, it's going to straight up be Nazi salutes, the swastikas, the flags. It's going to be the whole thing, right? Only instead of the swastika, it's going to be the American flag, or the Israeli flag, right? Yeah, Nakba was good, actually. Exactly. So, I'll need an explanation as to how funding a military base in the Middle East it helps our security. I don't really understand that. Right? Yeah, the goat isn't real, more like it. Got it. Got him. Having been hit with a devastating attack on its people beyond the fetid imagining of some of the vilest anti-Semites, Israel has in 12 months done nothing less than redraw the balance of global security, not just in the region, but in the wider world. I mean, this author is beginning to recognize that lots of countries are rejecting the West because of its sociopathic, genocidal narcissism, obviously. And so, yes, I guess it has redrawn the balance of global security because more and more countries and more people are beginning to realize that the United States and the West generally is just an evil force that needs to be stopped. It has eliminated thousands of the terrorists, people who are defending themselves, right? For those of you, like, it's like I'm reading something written by, like, Darth Vader, right? Or like somebody, a propagandist in the Empire. It has eliminated, you like literally could take this and put it in a movie and just read it verbatim. And just have an imperial guy just be like, it has eliminated thousands of the terrorists whose commitment to a savage theocratic ideology has claimed so many lives across the region and the world for decades. Yeah, how dare they fight back, right? How dare they fight back? Don't they know they should just lie down and allow us to commit a genocide against them? It has, with extraordinary tactical accuracy, dispatched some of the masterminds of the worst evil on the planet, including, most recently, Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader in Lebanon. So, literally celebrating a straight-up assassination in a foreign country, right? Like, and that's defending itself. So, assassinating foreign leaders is defending yourself. Got it. It has repelled and then reversed the previously inexorable advancing power of one of the world's most terrifying autocracies, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Oh, you wrote the whole name out. That makes it scarier. I love that this article came out the day before Iran carpet bombed you. Like, that's my favorite. It has repelled and reversed the previously advancing power. This aged well. Yeah, this aged really well. Right? Isn't it amazing how literally they're just like, we're the greatest, and the second they declare how awesome they are, that's when the worst stuff happens. It always seems to go that way, right? It's like biblical. There's something like biblical about it, where it's just straight up like, it's when a country is in the height of its arrogance that it experiences its most significant loss. Where it has demonstrated to all the West's foes. I mean, like, why does the West have so many foes? Man, it's just like the West has so many foes. Why? Man, they hate us for our freedoms. That's what. It has demonstrated to all the West foes, including Iran's allies in Moscow, in Beijing, that our system of free markets and free people and the voluntary alliance network we have constructed to defend it generates resources and capabilities of vast technological superiority. These guys are Nazis, eh? Like, this is just straight up Nazi shit. Like, just totally pumping up. Like, is there anybody in America who's like, hey, we're gonna have to, like, live peacefully with these people. It can't just be like an endless godless war forever, right? A woke CIA drone pilot. They hate our McDonald's. They hate our Applebee's. They hate our TGI Fridays. I'll put in to, I think that we should rename America to just Burger Corp, right? It's just Burger Corp at this point. Above all, it has provided an unexpected but crucial reminder to our enemies that there are at least some willing and able to pursue and defeat them, whatever the risk to our own lives and resources, says this guy, literally writing in like a comfortable room, probably in New York, right? Like, cowards like this who write this kind of cowardice, they're not actually risking their own lives, right? Like, he wants to fight to the last Ukrainian, and he wants to fight to the last Israeli. That's what he wants to do. He's not interested in, like, actually fighting. As long as you're fighting, then it's brave, and we're risking our lives. Yeah, it's us. It's us that's doing it. Oh man, this next entry, listen to this. The only appropriate responses to Israel's gallantry, fortitude, and skill from us, its nominal allies, especially in the US, are thank you and how can we help? Dude, just fucking lick the boot, dude. Just like put the boot in your mouth so that we can no longer hear the dumb shit that's coming out of your face, right? Like, this is just straight up imperial crazy bullshit. Instead, time and again, Israel's supposed friends, including the administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, have, while expressing sympathy over the outrage of October 7th and uttering the usual support for Israel's right to defend itself, repeatedly tried to restrain it from doing just that. Their early, valuable support has been steadily diminished by the way they have too often connived with the anti-Israel extremists in their own party. Like, nobody has given more money to Israel than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is, like, presiding over this whole genocide. Like, they could stop it if they wanted to, but it's just not enough for these psychopaths. Like, when you're a psychopath, the only answer is no. Is more, rather. Just more, right? Oh, you gave us $1 billion? That's not enough. It needs to be $2 billion. Oh, you gave us $2 billion? Not enough. $4 billion. It's always more, right? And if you can't, like, it's like America has, like, a financial domination kink, right? That they get off on being financially dominated. That they have, like, a girlfriend, Israel, who's just like, oh, you gave me $1 billion? Pathetic. A real man would give me $2 billion. And we're like, yeah, baby. Yeah. And that's like how it is. Right? That's like how it is. Yeah, just pay pigs. Exactly. Says the captain over on Twitch. Exactly. And that's just America, baby. That's how we are. We love it. Before Israel had even buried its dead last October, my favorite thing to point out is that most of the dead that happened in October were killed by Israel. But nobody seems to recognize that, but that's fine. And as Hamas was busy murdering its hostages, most of those hostages killed by Israel, there were calls for Israel to cease fire. Yeah, because you guys are the aggressors and obviously genocidal maniacs, very clearly. This guy's a Nazi, though, so he doesn't want to hear that. For a year, we have heard our leaders' balanced condemnations of Hamas and its terror masters on the one hand, and the Jewish state on the other, a false equivalence that says more about the moral disorder in our own politics than about Israel's motives and actions. Real important to remind everybody, this is in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal published this article, this literal open Nazi propaganda. Straight up Goebbels shit right here. Like, the people who publish this should go to the Hague for absolute sure. Certainty. Dead certainty. Because this is how they're going to try to erase the truth about the genocide in Gaza. That they're going to just talk about it this way. This is how they're going to discuss it. As if there was never a genocide, as if it never happened. They're just going to try to put it down the memory hole and make everybody forget. That's what they're trying to do. Isaac, good to see you. Rob Bob, good to see you too, my man. In Europe, they have gone even further, as usual, rewarding Hamas and Hezbollah by nominally recognizing a non-existent Palestinian state and prosecuting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on bogus war crimes charges. Just straight up, like, I know I keep saying it's straight up Nazism, but like, straight up Nazism. Do they not get that in the end, we have to make a choice? Our ally on the front lines of defense against barbarism, or our enemies, those who literally want to see us all buried? I mean, they keep saying over and over again that they want to just restore relations, right? Like, literally everything that I have ever heard from any Arab state is, we would really love to just normalize relations. We don't really want a war. We really don't want. But you guys keep bombing us, and you guys keep committing a genocide. And it makes it real difficult to work with you when you're so obviously psychopathic and so obviously interested in the destruction of everything around us. Like, for God's sakes, like, Israel is now bombing countries that have nothing to do with October 7th. They're bombing Lebanon. They're bombing Beirut. They're like, what do we need to see, right? Nazis like this are just not interested in reality, right? That they're interested in manufacturing a reality so that, like, the mega crowd and the blue mega crowd can go along with it. Fortunately for all of us, it seems Israel is prevailing despite the chorus of hecklers. We're prevailing by getting carpet bombed and having our economy collapse. That's winning, right? Failure is a victory. Perhaps all this sounds too blithe for skeptical readers. Oh, yeah, a little more than blithe, right? Let's, hold on. Blithe. Little bit more than blithe, right? Showing casual and cheerful indifference considered to be callous or improper. That's what blithe means. Yeah, I'd put it a little bit more than just blithe, right? This guy, what was his name? Gerard Baker is a psychopath, very clearly, obviously a Nazi, and should go to the Hague, right? Just nakedly. It's so obviously the case that this guy should just go to the Hague and likely be hung there with all the other war criminals that he's supporting, right? Like, as soon as you recognize that what Israel is doing is a genocide, authors like this, it becomes pretty clear what should happen to them. So I wouldn't describe that as blithe. I don't think I have casual indifference, right? I think I have deep revulsion for Nazis who should be hung at the Hague. Like, follow your leader. Or at least premature, given the rising expectation of a much wider conflict to come. And it is true that there has been awful loss of innocent lives in Gaza, Lebanon, and elsewhere that undoubtedly fuels the ire of the enemy across the world. Like, it's the fact that you keep calling the innocent children you murder the enemy, right? Like, maybe basic humanity, but Gerard Baker is obviously a psychopath, so it doesn't matter to him. What if Mr. Netanyahu and his government's aggressive prosecution proves a Pyrrhic victory? A Pyrrhic victory is a victory, but at what cost, right? That's what it is. It's when you win, but you basically lose you, like, technically win. And if you, like, actually think that Israel is going to walk away with this thing with any victory at all, like, this is the thing that these psychopaths don't understand, right? These people who have never seen combat, who won't watch the videos of the genocide that's happening on live stream services, like, that you can, like, literally watch just, like, days and days and days of a genocide unfolding. You can listen to the people on the ground. You can listen to the journalists. You can listen to all of that. These people never do any of that because they're just frauds, obviously. They're paid propagandists. The Wall Street Journal, like, this discredits the Wall Street Journal, right? Like, we should never pay any attention to them anymore, and the people who do pay attention to them in seriousness are Nazis. And this article basically shows you that's the case. Because if you're doing anything other than reading this with utter revulsion and thinking that this Gerard Baker guy is, oh yeah, this guy's nuts. Like, this guy should be drawn up on war crimes. Like, this is propaganda, obviously. If you're thinking anything other than that while you're reading this, chances are good you're just a Nazi, right? And it's okay. Just acknowledge it to yourself. It's fine. It's totally fine. Here we go. But the wider conflict was perhaps always inevitable. So our war crimes are fine because it was inevitable, right? Says this creepy guy. This just, like, creepy loser who's just hiding under his bed, basically. Given Iran's stated objectives and its consistent efforts to achieve them. What's Iran's stated objectives? Anybody know? This guy's not going to tell you, right? Maybe Iran's stated objectives is to get Israel to stop committing a genocide, or get Israel to stop bombing them and killing their leaders. Maybe, right? We can say two things tentatively about the long-feared wider confrontation. This guy's, he's not afraid of this confrontation. He's jerking off about it. First, the strategic, tactical, intelligence, and technological genius Israel has demonstrated over the past year might have done so much damage to Iran's proxy armies and their military and political leaders that they will be ill-prepared and equipped for the bigger struggle to come. And Israel, and let's hope reliable allies, better placed to defeat its enemies. These guys are delusional, eh? Like, just fucking deluded. Like, this guy literally thinks that Israel has intelligence and technological genius. Like, wow. Second, having observed this Israeli superiority over that time and eagerness not to bring the destruction on itself a wide war would surely bring, perhaps Iran will be deterred. I feel like this guy just lost the thread right here. Like, what the hell? We can say two things tentatively about the long-feared wider confrontation. Having observed this Israeli superiority over the time and eagerness not... Oh, I see what he's saying. He thinks that watching Israel's economy collapse, watching their military get beat up by Hamas, watching the Iron Dome fail like it did tonight, or like it did today, means that Israeli has superiority. And he's also just outright expressing straight up a supremacist ideology, right? Having observed this Israeli superiority, technological genius, right? Like, this guy's a supremacist, very clearly. I mean, he's a Nazi, so it makes sense. Or worse, a Zionist. Never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few. Winston Churchill said of the men of the Royal Air Force after they had repelled Hitler's Luftwaffe during the Battle of Britain. We should echo Reminder to some recently confused conservatives, the former were the good guys, the latter the real villains. It's so odd that these guys will like look at Hitler and be like, okay, yeah, he was the bad guy for sure. We should do everything he said. We should echo those words today as we watch in awe a country smaller in area than New Jersey, with a population less than North Carolina and an economy smaller than that of Washington State, has done for all of us. This guy hasn't once said what they have done. Like, what have they done? What are they accomplishing there actually? Like, what is it that Israel's actually done, really? As Israelis solemnly mark a year since October 7th, we should not only redouble our expressions of sympathy and solidarity, we should show them our gratitude. And if we are really willing to be honest, acknowledge a little of our own shame. And of course, this guy is saying we should acknowledge a little of our own shame because we didn't give them enough money. We didn't fund them enough, right? The American military can't defeat the Yemenis. Right? The American military can't defeat Yemen. It can't defeat the Iraqis. Like, I don't. Generation Y Me writes, this guy should feel shame. Yeah, I don't think he's capable of that. Straight up. Like, I think what I just read there, I think that the Wall Street Journal is publishing. Here we go. Jerry Baker is editor at large of the Wall Street Journal. So he's the editor at large. So the Wall Street Journal is a Nazi paper. His weekly column for the editorial page Free Expression appears in the Wall Street Journal each Tuesday. So he's a weekly columnist for the Wall Street Journal, which is a Nazi paper, as we all just discovered. Mr. Baker is also host of Wall Street Journal at Large with Jerry Baker, a weekly news and current affairs interview show on the Fox Business Network, and the weekly Wall Street Journal opinion podcast Free Expression, where he speaks with some of the world's leading writers, influencers, and thinkers about a variety of subjects. Only the Nazis, though. Like, he probably never once talks to people who are like, reality exists, right? We should talk about that. He previously served as the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones from 2013 to 2018. And yabba, yabba, yabba. He was educated at Corpus Christi College, Oxford University, where he graduated in 1983 with a first-class honors degree in philosophy, politics, and economics. Yeah, weird how Oxford keeps just graduating Nazis, right? It's really wild. So I'm going to go use the washroom really quickly, and then we're going to pivot to one of my favorite authors, who I think is very prescient on all of this, because we got to keep things fair and balanced around here. Caitlin Johnstone. Jesus. I can pronounce things. We here at the Canadian Commie hold a professional standard. So, excuse me for just one moment. I drank too much coffee. I drank too much coffee. I drank too much coffee. So it had to make me pee. Okay. Good Westerners don't start off hating Israel, but truth eventually leads them there. This is going to be great. It's going to be great to juxtapose the Nazi propaganda, the Zionist propaganda that we all just went through. A sincere dedication to truth, justice, and kindness can only lead one to view the Zionist project with complete revulsion after learning the facts about what it really is, what it really does, and why our Western governments really support it. This is from Caitlin Johnstone. Good Westerners don't start off hating Israel. When our hearts are in the right place, we start off giving Israel the benefit of the doubt, and assuming the situation must be more complicated than it appears. Because we're not just going to reflexively assume the Jewish state is evil like some kind of neo-Nazi. We grew up learning about the prosecution of the German people, or the persecution of the Jewish people, watching movies and reading books about it and vowing never again, like everyone else. So, for entirely sensible and good-natured reasons, we tend to start off viewing anything to do with Jews and Judaism in a sympathetic light. It's not until we start learning and paying attention to Israel's actions that this view begins to change. We come to understand that Israel is in fact profoundly evil, not because it is full of Jews, but because it's a Western settler colonialist project that's inflicting the same kinds of genocide, ethnic cleansing, theft, and abuse on the indigenous population of the land that other Western settler colonialist projects like Australia, the United States, and Canada inflicted in earlier centuries. And we learn that this evil doesn't just pervade the Israeli government, but all of Israeli society, not because of Judaism or Jewishness, but for the same reason hatred and racism pervaded the societies of the Jim Crow South and apartheid South Africa. Israelis are indoctrinated from birth to view the non-Jewish indigenous populations of the region as less than human, because otherwise it would make no moral sense for there to be a state where one ethnic group receives preferential treatment over the others, or for that state to have been dropped on top of a pre-existing civilization without the permission of the people who live there. This indoctrination is not glue that holds the whole this indoctrination is the glue that holds the whole settler colonialist project together. We learn that this is what we are seeing when we translate comments Israelis make in Hebrew on social media, which look like a page out of Hitler's Mein Kampf, or when we see photos of Israeli soldiers mockingly dressing in the clothing of the dead or displaced Palestinian women, and playing with the toys of dead or displaced Palestinian children, or when we read polls of Jewish Israelis supporting Israel's daily massacres in Gaza and Lebanon. This is just what it looks like when an entire society is indoctrinated from birth into viewing their neighbors as mindless savages. And we gradually come to understand that just as Jewish Israelis are indoctrinated in a way that warps their perception and their conscience, we ourselves were indoctrinated to see Israel in a sympathetic light. All our news media constantly frame Israel as the victim in whatever violence it is involved in, and all our politicians constantly frame Israel as a friend, and anyone who opposes it as an enemy. This happens for the same reason the Western political media class lies to us about every Western war, because Israel is a crucial component in the Western war machine. That's the only reason its settler colonialist project is supported by the Western Empire. Joe Biden has often said that if there wasn't an Israel, the United States would have to create one to protect its interests in the Middle East. Having a state which is both A, artificially constructed from the ground up by Western forces, and B, fully dependent on the support of the Western Empire, gives the empire a permanent tool with which to justify the non-stop military presence necessary to dominate a crucial resource-rich region, and to create the violence and chaos necessary to keep the Middle East from uniting into a mighty superpower bloc which isn't beholden to Western interests. This is why Israel is so important to the Western Empire, which in turn is why we've always been bombarded with mass media messaging telling us we should support Israel. Good Westerners don't start off hating Israel because we grow up marinating in an information environment which programs us to support it, and which exploits the historic persecution of the Jews to manipulate us into backing a murderous apartheid state which cannot exist without non-stop war. Good Westerners don't start off hating Israel, but if they are truly good, they end up hating Israel. A sincere dedication to truth, justice, and kindness can only lead one to view the Zionist project with complete revulsion after learning the facts about what it really is, what it really does, and why our Western governments really support it. And we're seeing this manifest in very sinister and dark ways in our society. Germany to deny citizenship to people who share, like, or comment on "From the River to the Sea" slogan. There's your freedom right there, right? There's your freedom of expression. So if you say "From the river to the sea," you could just have your citizenship straight up denied. That's not some Nazi shit right there, right? That's some normal stuff. Yep, Germany's back, baby. Exactly. Long Defiant writes, what Israel is doing has really given right-wing conspiracy theorists a platform. Twitter is openly anti-Semitic now. Yeah, my concern, of course, is that people are not going to make a distinction between Zionists and Jews. That's the thing that makes it so dangerous, is that when this all blows back, right, it's not going to be, we got to make sure these Zionists are not around. It's going to be, we got to make sure these Jews are not around, right? And they're going to conflate the Zionist project with Judaism. That's what they're going to do, right? Like these right-wing people who don't read their own books, who don't know anything about what's going on in the wider world, who have no theories, who are easy to manipulate, are going to be suckered into following a path that's very similar to a path that was laid out in front of people in Germany through the 1930s and 40s, right? Which is that all your problems are coming from immigrants and Jews, right? Like, we've seen it before. Yeah, it's so important we protect our Jewish allies and we call out anti-Semitism. Well, Zionism itself is anti-Semitism. And I think that's the big thing to recognize and realize and argue for, is that Zionism does make the claim that the only true Jew is a Zionist. And that if any Jew denounces the Zionist project, then they are not a real Jew. What's more anti-Semitic than that? I can't think of anything more anti-Semitic than that. What? You think differently than me? Then you're not a real Jew. You're a sub-Jew. You're a subclass. You're someone I can reject. Absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. And like, the results sort of speak for themselves. Right? The results sort of speak for themselves. Like, Israel is getting carpet bombed right now. Dragonfruit says, good to see you again. Good to see you too, Dragonfruit. As always. Have you heard about this port strike that's affecting the east coast of the United States? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think it's important to point out that the strike movement and what's going on in the United States is just the beginning of it. Right? That these strikes are not going to be the resolution of the crisis in the United States, because these strikes are essentially being done along liberal lines. Right? Piecemeal reformism, let's get that 2% over 5-year improvement, right? That the people who are striking and the people who are organizing the strikes have not actually embraced and understood that their society has gone full-blown psychotic, that the people who own the society are basically fine if you strike, that they will absolutely allow millions of people to run out of goods or to starve or to do anything, right? They absolutely will do that if it means an improvement of their bottom line by 0.3%. And the hard reality is that, like, the billionaire class has so much wealth that they don't really care anymore. It doesn't really matter to them. Like, they've already split off and created like a Jeffrey Epstein-based economy at this point, right? And I mean, they're fine if people like, Diddy get thrown under the bus, right? They're fine if like the black Jeffrey Epstein gets thrown under the bus and like distracts people away from, how the bankers are basically fleecing you every single moment of your life. But so my expectation of this is that what it'll do is you'll have like 1 year where everything's going to be like, everything's going to get really fucky for about 3 months, 4 months, right? And public pressure is going to come up, and it's going to come up against the strikers. This is going to lead them to signing some kind of weak deal, like your 5% over 10 years improvement kind of thing, and they'll all like celebrate it, pop the champagne cork, yay, and then 5 years will pass or 10 years will pass, and they'll all be like, nothing changed. Life's exactly the same as it was before, right? Perhaps even worse, because the reality is that we have to raise the consciousness of the people. And the trouble is that the people are completely uneducated. And in fact, counter-educated, right? Anti-educated. They don't actually have a basic education of how even their own political system works, let alone how to operate within it. So they're just... And as long as they keep striking within the bounds of what is reasonable, right? What is... or the bounds of civil discourse, if you prefer, right? That there's a limit to what a person can or cannot do, right? To remain polite in society. As long as they keep playing by the rules laid out by their owners, everyone's just going to keep losing, right? Everyone's just going to keep losing. Yeah, Biden will force him back to work, yeah, like Trudeau did with the CN workers. Omnicidal writes, they said the same thing about Occupy Wall Street. They said what about Occupy Wall Street? I would argue that Occupy Wall Street was a resounding success, considering the entrenched nature of capital, right? Like, they didn't get any concessions, but they definitely, like, you want to talk about consciousness raising. You want to talk about, like, breaking through in a society that is basically dead in terms of its actual awareness or consciousness. Wall Street Journal, Occupy Wall Street was a huge moment in terms of breaking through and actually getting people more aware of what's actually going on. The concept of the 1% comes out of Occupy Wall Street, and that's actually a major cultural achievement. To get terminology into the discourse, to get like an understanding in the discourse, I think is a major accomplishment. And also, from anybody who's like paying attention, it also showed you exactly what the state is willing to do. That should there be, and I mean, we're seeing echoes of that in this Palestinian struggle, right? Kids are putting up big protests and big encampments in universities, and they're just going to clear it out. Right? Just like the Occupy Wall Street movement got cleared out. Right? And so we're seeing very clearly what the state is willing to do. And that's just going to get worse, by the way, as the cop cities finish, as you have fortresses, right? Here, hold on. We have a fellow here on Twitch. Comes in. His comments are being restricted because it says likely harasser. Wow, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. What's my opinion on Germany? Germany is taking a very hard right turn. And as it moves forward, it's fairly clear that the power structure is becoming more accommodating. And they're simply returning to form. Right? That as things get more intense, as things get more insane, as things get more ridiculous, I think Germany is just going to continue doing what it's doing now, which is moving to the far right, which it's done before, if you'll recall, right? I don't know if you're a history buff or not, but not that long ago, maybe about 80 years ago, right? Germany decided that it wanted to fight a war against the whole world, rounded up all of its Jews and Romani minority groups and communists, and sent them to concentration camps and like exterminated them on an industrial level. Yeah. And then after that happened, all of those Nazis, like they grabbed a handful of them, right? Adolf Hitler shot himself because he's a coward ultimately. But Goebbels and a couple other ones went to The Hague and were hung. But all the other Nazis were rehabilitated. And by the 60s, Nazis were sitting on the board of, were chairman of the board of NATO. So they were completely rehabilitated politically. You have Nazis like Carl Schmitt allowed to publish articles in the public space and be taken seriously as a lawyer, right? And you have other philosophers using his work. And so my expectation is that Germany will just become Nazi again, right? And that what'll eventually happen is the United States will say to Europe, you should have your own military. Well, why are we protecting you? Why are we funding you? Why are we funding your military support? You should fund your own militaries. And Germany will go, okay. And they'll build a massive military and they'll do exactly the same thing that they've always done, right? Like, they didn't learn their lesson the first time, right? And they've clearly been given like a little kiss on the cheek and been completely forgiven and allowed to be part of major international organizations. Oops, sorry about that Nazism. We're better now, we promise. No, you're not. Like, no, you're not. Straight up. And everything that we're seeing coming out of Germany in regards to this Palestinian genocide that they're funding tells you pretty cleanly that that's the path that they're taking. It won't be too much longer until they're just going to start rounding these people up and just ethnically cleansing them. They'll reopen Auschwitz, right? That's what Germany's going to do. Because that's what Germany's always done. And it's not going to be new, right? It's going to look pretty much the same. Like, I think the important thing for us to remember as we're dealing with this absolute catastrophe of Western civilization is that it's just echoes of the same shit, right? That we are descendants of the Romans. We are descendants of this insane period of time. We are the descendants of the Crusaders, right? We're the descendants of serfs and monarchs, and we are the descendants of settler colonialists, right? That our solutions to basically everything is to go to war. We don't know how to negotiate. We don't know how to do self-reflection. We don't know how to think logically, because we think that being afraid of brown people is logical, right? We hold on to the idea that nationalism is an inherent good, and that nationalism is a force for good in the world, and that the nation needs to be held above all other things, even above humanity itself. And we're willing to exterminate huge groups of people to do that. And we're willing to destroy huge other cultures and nations and states. We're completely willing to do that. We've shown it over and over and over and over and over and over. The evidence is overwhelming. And so the moment that the United States finally releases its hand from Germany's throat and says, and like Trump said it, right? And there's a lot of people in America that agree with him. Why are we paying to defend Europe? Europe should pay to defend itself. They should build their own military. They should build their own forces. Well, we know what that results in. We know what Europe will do. And how do we know? Because it's all they've ever done. Like, the true definition of insanity is to do the same thing and expect a different result. And the only reason why Europe hasn't already plunged itself into another war with itself internally is because it's been neutered. The United States hasn't permitted it to build a military force. It's not allowed. Germany's not allowed to have a navy. It's not allowed to have a standing army. It's not allowed to build anything. right? Why? Because the last time they did that, they went full-blown Nazi. And when they are permitted to do so again, they will do so again. Because that's who they are, and that's what they do during times of crisis. And how do we know? Because that's what they've done every single time. And I don't know why we should expect a different result. Right? So that's what I think of Germany. And that's not to say that there aren't good people in Germany, right? Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a good man that lived in Germany before the Nazis murdered him, right? There were good people in Germany before they got rounded up. But that's what Germany is. And it's going to continue being that way. And you don't need to dig too deep to see that that's the case. So, my... and I think that that's going to be fairly ubiquitous across Europe, by the way. I don't think Germany's the only one. But you asked my opinion of Germany, there it is. YouTube Russia wakes up Germany. I love, what is this? What is that? Heart of Iron 4. Heart of Iron 4 and all these games are the worst things to ever happen to our generation, man. Just like absolute dead-brained, totally, like, these games have definitely instilled, and it's the same thing with like Call of Duty, right? The inevitability of war, the inevitability of conflict, that we have instilled inside the minds of our children the idea that these conflicts are inevitable, so we might as well get ahead of it, right? It's straight up just George Bush first strike stuff, right? It's straight up just George Bush saying, well, we got to hit them first because they're going to hit us first, right? There was a term that they used for this that I'm completely forgetting, but it literally was just strike first because they're going to strike at you, so you might as well get ahead of them. And so we've instilled this in the minds of our children and the minds of our society. And we've just said, well, they're going to strike at us. And it's like, are they? Like, the United States is surrounded by 2 gigantic oceans, if you actually looked at a map, which most Americans don't. Like, who's going to strike at you? Like, America has surrounded itself with this enormous, extremely powerful military and navy. Like, the amount of difficulty it would take for any country to actually build any kind of military force to actually come over here in the first place would be astounding. Like, we would be able to see it coming from a mile away. Like, we literally have satellites in space taking pictures of the surface of Earth. If they were building a navy capable to come over to America and cause any problems, we would know about it. Right? So everything that we're doing over there in terms of our justification of saying, oh, we got to hit them before they hit us, they're not capable of hitting us. It's just a joke. It's just a total fucking fart joke. They don't have the capacity. They can't actually deliver. Right? They don't have boats. Like, who's going to hit us? What are you talking about? And if they were capable of hitting us, do you think that the best strategy moving forward would be to piss them off as much as possible? You think that's the way forward? Yeah, Joe said they mock peace and cooperation as utopian and naive. Yeah, because they're psychopathic, right? Dragonfruit writes, would you consider us to be in World War III by now? It definitely feels that way. Look, we've been in World War III for a long time. Like, for a long time. The World War III idea, right? I'm trying to be real gentle when I say this, because I think that this is one of these things that we are all kind of guilty of, because we have, like, we all have our inherent biases, and we all have our inherent positions, and we all have that, right? Like, and it takes a long time to shake it off and to think beyond, those biases. And then even when you shake off those biases for a moment, you fall back into them and you forget how to get out of them again. And then you move on to a new subject. And it's one of the things that's very frustrating about being a person and being a human being, is that you can advance in a very far away from your biases and have a lot of empathy and compassion and a larger perspective along one line. And then the minute you turn to another line, you're just right back where you started. And you got to figure out how to get through again. And that happens over and over again. And so with all of the gentle kindness that I have in my heart when I say this, people who say, is World War III going to start, are living in a space where they don't understand that World War III started a long time ago. It just didn't matter to you. It just didn't affect you, right? The only way it actually kind of affected you in any way that you could sort of perceive is that, you have to pay taxes. Like the government takes taxes from you, and then they give them to Lockheed Martin to build a bunch of bombs to go blow the shit out of some place. But like for goodness sakes, let's just go from 9/11, right? Just 9/11. So they managed to get a plane and blow up something in the United States, right? They blow up a thing they blow up the Twin Towers. They hit the Pentagon, right? One of the planes gets downed. And of course, there's big talk about like, it's an inside job and all that stuff, yabba yabba, blah blah blah. Who is actually behind it? Was it the Zionists? Was it the Saudis? Yabba yabba, so on and so forth. Yaga yaga yaga, right? But that's a good place to look at, because that's the moment when most Americans realized that the rest of the world existed, right? So just like forget about everything that happened before that, right? So forget about all of the meddling that the United States was doing. That means that you literally are forgetting about people like Pinochet. That means you're literally forgetting about like the Cuban Revolution in Cuba, right? And Batista and all this, right? Forget about the fact that the Cold War is a world war, very clearly, right? And they called it a Cold War just because it was a series of proxy wars. But since 9/11, the United States has basically, like, it destroyed Afghanistan, it destroyed Iraq, it destroyed Yemen, it destroyed Oman, it literally destroyed Libya in big and serious ways. It's overthrown governments all throughout Africa. Like, straight up, there was a coup attempt this year in the DRC. I'm trying to think of, like, the other big ones that they've been doing. There's evidence to show that they're getting they're in Burma and Thailand and Nepal. Like, it's just like they're just everywhere. Venezuela, Jeff, that's a good one. Yeah, Venezuela and all the dicking around they've been doing in Venezuela. What's currently going on in Argentina, right? It's just like I guess I'm just trying to decode what people mean when they say World War III is going to start. Because to me, when they say World War III is going to start, it seems like they've just like excluded South America, Africa, the Middle East from the world. That's just not the world, right? That the world is Europe and the United States and Australia and Canada. That's the world. And that the only thing that really matters is direct confrontation between the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, and Russia or China. And that's like kind of it. But like, we've been in World War III the whole time. We've just been in this never-ending godless war since at least September 11th, 2001. But way before that, like, the United States has been completely dicking around everywhere in the world since the beginning of its whole thing. So I guess it's only World War III if it affects us. As long as it's affecting brown people in the Middle East or black people in Africa or Latinos, it doesn't matter, right? It's just our war of aggression. That's just one big gigantic force that's spreading throughout the world. But it's only World War III if like San Francisco gets hit. It's only World War III if there's a military force that's threatening Miami, I guess. Like, I would argue that what the United States is doing is a world war. And it has been doing that for a long time. Since at least 2001. Since at least 2001. But essentially you go from World War II to the Cold War to this current endless war state. The war on terror, I guess is what you would call it. But just nobody calls it World War III. Except me. So that's sort of my opinion on that. Like, our entire economy is built around the idea of building weapons and bombs. Like, we don't do anything else. We don't build anything else. Right? And then we use those weapons and bombs to destroy places that are actually building stuff and then force them to import cheap goods to us. Right? That's how our entire economy works. And that's a war economy. Right? That you go to work at Walmart distributing goods that come in from other countries. You get taxed, right? And that tax money goes to make weapons and bombs in order to subjugate the nations for whose goods you distributed. That's the economy. That's the cycle of the economy, fundamentally. And sure, there are different people within there. There's lawyers and bankers. There's engineers. There's dock workers, right? But that statement that I just made is fundamentally the economy of the United States. That's what makes this dock workers strike so interesting, because it is actually like, if the dock workers don't let the goods in, then America doesn't do anything. It doesn't manufacture anything. It doesn't design anything. It doesn't create anything. It doesn't produce anything outside of just like they grow grain, right? The United States like grows grain and also manufactures weapons. But like, and so if you're living in this persistent, never-ending war economy where it's completely based on the idea that you can just go into any country, overthrow their leaders, destroy their country, steal their resources, and then extract those resources, literally send those resources to another country that you've already destroyed or negotiated with, and then ship all of that back to the United States. Looks like a World War to me. It looks like World War III for sure. eFrench4401, I don't know if I've ever seen you here before, says, we design things, especially SaaS products. What are SaaS products? Joe says, we make porn. Yeah, a very important a very important cultural artifact, I guess. Software as a service. eFrench is going to get real deep down a rabbit hole here. Is software as a service basically just like renting out software? So instead of actually buying the software and having it, it's like we rented it? Because there's your capitalist innovation right there. Speaking of that, I'm absolutely going to pivot over to this story. Here's a heartwarming story to really make you feel good about capitalism. Paralyzed man unable to walk after maker of his powered exoskeleton tells him it's now obsolete. This is the dystopian nightmare that we've kind of entered in. A former jockey who was left paralyzed from the waist down after a horse riding accident was able to walk again thanks to a cutting-edge piece of robotic tech, a $100,000 ReWalk personal exoskeleton. When one of its small parts malfunctioned, however, the entire device stopped working. Desperate to gain his mobility back, he reached out to the manufacturer, LifeWard, for repairs. But it turned him away, claiming his exoskeleton was too old. 404 Media reports. After 371,091 steps, my exoskeleton is being retired after 10 years of unbelievable physical therapy, Michael Straight posted on Facebook earlier this month. The reasons why it has stopped is a pathetic excuse for a bad company to try to make more money. According to Straight, the issue was caused by a piece of wiring that had come loose from the battery that powered a wristwatch used to control the exoskeleton. This would cost peanuts for Life Ward to fix up, but it refused to service anything more than 5 years old, Straight said. I find it very hard to believe that after paying nearly $100,000 for the machine and training that a $20 battery for the watch is the reason I can't walk anymore, he wrote on Facebook. As this infuriating case shows, advanced medical devices can change the lives of people living with severe disabilities. But the flip side is they also make their owners dependent on the whims of the device's manufacturers, who often operate in ruthless self-interest. In some cases, these companies can shut down entirely, leaving a patient stuck with proprietary tech that needs specialized software or hardware to maintain. One man, for example, was forced to spend enormous amounts of time and effort to teach himself how to repair a device that managed his debilitating cluster headaches after the company that made it went belly up. Others lost their sight when the manufacturer of a bionic eye stopped supporting the devices. That some of these manufacturers can come and go isn't the point, though. As 404 notes, the issue is the nefarious practices that many of them use to make their devices difficult to fix without their help. In absence of strong regulations called right to repair laws, manufacturers aren't obligated to share the specialized parts, tools, and guides that make third-party repairs possible. In the tech world, Apple is particularly notorious for its hostility towards using aftermarket parts to repair its devices. Some manufacturers will go as far to lean on people who share independently created repair guides for their products. This is the dystopian nightmare that we've kind of entered in, where the manufacturer perspective on products is that their responsibility completely ends when it hands over to a customer. Nathan Proctor, head of the Right to Repair project at the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, told 404. That's not good enough for a device like this, but it's also the same thing we see up and down with every single product. People need to be able to fix things. There needs to be a plan in place, he added. A $100,000 product you can only use as long as the battery lasts? That's enraging. Fortunately, Life Ward eventually capitulated, and Straight was able to get his exoskeleton repaired. But that was only after an intense campaign in which he went on local TV, got highlighted in a horse industry publication, and gained steam on social media. If it weren't for that, he could still be struggling to find a way to get his mobility back again. Isn't it great that we've left the health and well-being of the nation in the hands of ruthless psychopaths? Isn't that great? Isn't it wonderful how we've built our entire system on asking permission from psychos if we can actually have a decent existence? CH, good to see you. Right to repair is a human right, and for a cyborg, it's a right to survive it all. Hardware companies cannot write software, and letting them write it is mass murder. Software for medical must be open source, period. Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, planned obsolescence for the win, you bet. Generation Y me? God damn it, I hate this place. Yeah, it's sort of crazy how, like, we've invented these, like, medical marvels. Right? Like, this is pretty incredible, in fact. Like, it's a cool thing. And somebody who's a fan of capitalism might use it as a, well, look what capitalism did. It created this really great thing. But as capitalism always does, right? Capitalism ruins everything. It can't help itself. It just has to. Because there's $100,000 to be made off this guy to give him the promise of walking again. And there's no money to be made to keep him walking. Right? Nobody said we had to keep him walking. What a world we live in. What a world we live in. CH writes, 45 years in software and I am now a hard gulag Stalinist when it comes to proprietary device drivers. Open the code or gulag. I mean, there's so much cool stuff that we could do if it was just open code, right? If it was just open source. If it was just something that we could all engage in without having the legal side of it. And I feel that way from the cultural side as well. Like, the way copyright law works in this country, like, no wonder the society is, like, culturally dead, right? We're not allowed to iterate. We're not allowed to build off of what just happened. I've got an article up here. Sean Diddy Combs hit with a wave of 120 new sexual assault allegations. I don't know how much I want to talk about this, honestly. And it is kind of a break from the ongoing, unfolding genocide, and that we just read articles literally written by Nazis that are the head of the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. I think the thing that kills me about this story is how has it been permitted to go on for as long as it did? Like, Omnicidal says, I find this Diddy thing tiring. Yeah, I feel that way too, you know? Like, how is it that this operation, which seems to me to have been happening in plain sight, right? Like, I never once gave two shits about this guy, so I don't listen to his music, I don't pay attention to him. But, like, since this happened, I've kind of, like, looked his way. And literally, I just look at the guy and I'm like, oh, yeah. Like, how was this allowed to continue? How is this a thing? How is it the case that this guy has just been able to kind of run this little thuggish, mafioso, like sex assault ring, basically? Yeah, why do you need 45 gallons of baby oil? Yeah. Joe writes, my coworker opined that the Diddy coverage is a distraction. I mean, I probably, like, and any story to get you to stop talking about Israel, you know, any story to get you to stop talking about the empire. But I would argue that this ties in, right? Like, that my perspective and my position, and I think a big reason why people keep coming back to listen to what I have to say, is that it is all connected. Like, there is no such thing as distraction anymore. That, like, someone like P. Diddy is allowed to do what he's allowed to do because it's a psychopathic culture, right? And that as long as he's rich and famous and has power, that's good enough for anybody, right? They don't need to enter any other space of justification of any sort. No, he's rich, so he can do what he wants, right? And, like, if this is what Sean Combs is doing, if this is what this guy is doing, then, like, what do you think Bezos is doing? What do you think Peter Thiel is doing? What do you think Elon Musk is doing? Like, the guys with real power and real money and real wealth, what do you think they're up to? XD writes, he's praised as a pimp. Yeah, that's the oddest thing, dude. I remember when I was growing up, there was a craze that happened in the 90s where somehow and for some reason pimp became a positive. It became a good thing. People would say, like, that's pimpin'. Like, we were all supposed to look at these pimps and be like, yeah, that's something that is good. It's just like a corroded society that has no moral center at all. Yeah, the 200 billionaires, a ridiculous concept, must be somehow involved in worse. Yeah. Yeah, big pimpin' from Jay-Z. Yeah. And, like, you listen to these guys talk about this stuff, and you're just like, for some reason, it just seems so abstract. And I think really that's kind of what it is that the human imagination struggles to actually grab hold of... Like, I remember during the Occupy Wall Street days, it was really clear to me that most people just could not grab hold of what $1 billion actually is. They actually don't... people couldn't really even understand it. That the difference between 1 million and 1 billion was like... They were, as far as they were concerned, it was a letter of the alphabet. They didn't really get that, like, no, dude, like, the difference between 1 million and 1 billion is like, with 1 million you can get a nice house. With 1 billion you can buy a country. Like, it's different. And the concept that they earned it is just a childish iteration or a childish statement of that misunderstanding. It's like there's just no way that a person could ever earn that much wealth. And like, CH writes, I blame Ayn Rand. She openly gushed over a serial killer, opened the gates for this open adoration of monsters who make their own rules. It's not just Ayn Rand, though. Like, there is this culture. There is something worth observing in our culture where we love villains. We love to watch villains, certainly. Like, some of the most popular media that has happened in America in the last couple of decades is literally Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, Dexter, right? Characters who are objectively villains, and yet we're fascinated by them. Generation says, have you ever seen her movie Fountainhead? The main character is so horrible. I just can't... I started engaging with Ayn Rand's stuff, and it was so tedious. Like, this is how you know our culture is completely unserious. Is that this, like, third-rate author who is bad. Like, she's not a good author. Her writing is tiresome and tedious. Forget about the quality of her characters or anything. Just the way she describes things, her language. It's like a fourth grade reading level, basically. And the idea that people are reading this and this is the center of their political ideology and they become objectivists because they read Ayn Rand. I mean, that's what you get when you have an illiterate culture that doesn't know anything. Like, have you read anything else? Like, if Ayn Rand is the only thing you've read, if your reading level is like the Babysitter's Club, the Hardy Boys, Dog Cop, and like Garfield. Like, if that's where you're at, but Ayn Rand coming along, like if you're just reading like Twilight, and then Ayn Rand comes along and it's like, oh, here's a whole philosophy of thought baked into this ridiculous notion that we should somehow venerate industrialists as superhuman people, while we completely ignore who's actually making them the money and how they're actually making their money, right? And like but the justification that these objectivists, these psychos, use is that is a social Darwin explanation, right? It's just social Darwinism, that he's good because he's a big, strong man, right? He's so powerful. He's willing to dominate others. And if those people didn't want to be dominated, then they should get together and dominate him back. That in the view of the objectivists, it's just force of violence. It's the only force that matters. And there's nothing else to appeal to, and there's no other way to have any discussion about anything. And so rather than saying, well, it's up to the weak to come together and fight back against the strong, hacks like Rand just say, bend the knee to power, right? Which, I mean, she is, case in point, the reason why this idea fails. She died on welfare, penniless and alone. Like, where's your big, strong industrialist? What, he didn't protect you? CH writes, it's not Ayn Rand starting it, it's gangsters were admired in the 1930s. It's normal if people hate the system. I like the 1943 Italian film adaptation of We the Living. It has an amazing backstory, and it's her only good book. I just don't see any reason to engage seriously with Ayn Rand. Like, she's just a hack, obviously. Like, the only reason that she should be engaged with seriously is because a whole bunch of dim-witted losers are in politics actually talking about her book. I'm actually going through Lord of the Rings again, read by Andy Serkis. I highly advise. I think everybody would be better off finding good art and actually engaging meaningfully with good art. And good art that I have actually found is Andy Serkis reading Lord of the Rings. That's a good one. We have somebody over on Twitch, Stelino. Hi, sir. Hello to you. What do I know about... I don't know who this is. Jogashiv Yosef? I don't know who this is. So, nothing. So, pivoting over, majority of Canadians don't see themselves as settlers, poll finds. Perhaps surprisingly, 41% of Canadians ages 18 to 34 disagree with being labeled colonialists or colonists. So 41% of Canadians 18 to 34 disagree with reality. I mean, let's call it as it is. Like, every single... yeah, that 41% probably supports Zionism. Yep. That makes sense. Because, like, it's so easy to disprove, right? If somebody says, I don't consider myself a colonist, you just go, oh, when did your family move to Canada? When did your family move to Canada? Because your family moved to Canada, right? And they'll and what they'll say is, I don't know, right? Because that's how this happens. People don't even know their own family history, let alone the history of their own country. And if you just say to these people, the 41% of Canadians aged 18 to 34, when did your family move to Canada? Then all of a sudden there's a whole conversation about, well, at what point did your family colonize Canada? That's what's going on. And yet, 41% of Canadians disagree with it. How do we have a meaningful conversation with ourselves if we're not going to actually seriously engage with reality? Like, this is something that I find myself constantly at odds with in the society. Stolano wrote, oh, what do you think about Stalin? Yeah, Stalin's name is Iosif Jogashiv. I thought that's what you were referring to, bud. Thank you for clarifying. Oh, man, what's my opinion? What do I think about Stalin? Okay. I think Stalin was put into a position... He was certainly a man of the people. He was put into a position because of his... He excelled at building confidence amongst his peers. Uh, people took him for as being very competent, intelligent, and dedicated. And then most importantly, and I really do think this is what propelled him into the position after Lenin's death, people believed that he took their concerns seriously, no matter how small those concerns might actually be. That, in my view, is really what does propel him forward. That he's constantly thinking and constantly writing and constantly speaking in a way so as to appeal to the everyman in Russia at that time. And other people within Russia, within the Communist Party, within the Bolshevik Party at that time, and the Mensheviks and so on and so forth, I think got caught up in a kind of elitism and a kind of they got very insular and were focused on not higher, but just like focused on things that didn't really matter or resonate with the regular person on the ground. Whereas I think Stalin was able to galvanize a lot of support and build a lot of support because he did take those concerns seriously. And I think if you wanted to get into controversial decisions that Stalin made, I do think that one of the most controversial decisions that he made that I ultimately support was the land reform movement that he did, where he took on the kulaks. But I think that that's a type of policy that the people who supported him wanted him to do. Right? That's a policy that helps the peasants a great deal. Whereas I think other elements within the Bolshevik Party would have been more willing to simply let it slide. We don't need to have that confrontation. We don't need to embroil ourselves in that. It's very difficult. And then ultimately, like, Stalin's the guy that leads you through World War II. He's the leader who defeats the Nazis, right? So, hold on a second here, guys. I've got to help my dog. You okay, buddy? You okay, buddy? You okay? Yeah, you're okay. Good boy, buddy. No? Okay. The real question... Okay, sorry guys. Milo, are you good or not? I gotta keep going, buddy. I think he's putting it on for attention. The real question when it comes to Stalin is he genuine or not? Like, is he this power-mad, dedicated only to his own power, right? Or is he actually interested in the project of socialism and communism? Is he actually interested in changing the face? He's interested in changing the face of his country seriously. And I think it's very difficult to argue that he was not serious about improving the quality of life of the average Russian citizen, of making things better for Russians. And so, and then ultimately, like, you can tie what's going on in China today and in Russia today to Stalin. So he's a deeply important figure. And I think that he was genuine. I think that his concerns were genuine. I think that he wanted to make a stronger Russia, or a stronger Soviet Union, as he would see it. And so I think that ultimately does make him a good leader, and somebody who is worth paying attention to, and someone who is worth considering. Because I don't think that his ideas... Like, it's very often the case that the conversation about Stalin essentially boils down to Trotsky versus Stalin. But at the end of the day, I don't think Trotsky's a very important person. And that Stalin is a much more important person than Trotsky. And so I just don't think that it's worthwhile having this constant, bringing up this constant feud over and over and over and over again. And rather just look at Stalin for who he is. And it's very difficult to make the case that Stalin was a bad leader and that he had bad intentions for his own country. That if they're... And oftentimes the criticisms that come Stalin's way are like, oh, he should have prevented the war. It's like, what are you talking? He's not God. Like, he's not a superhuman character. And so, like, if it's not for Stalin, Mao basically doesn't win his own revolution, right? Stalin was instrumental. And that's what leads to the Sino-Soviet split after Stalin's death. So there are big reverberations because of Joseph Stalin, and I think that he is an important figure, and he was instrumental in winning World War II. The Bolsheviks were instrumental in defeating the Nazis by the admission of the Nazis themselves. So I think it takes a real, like, you've got to be a real hard-nosed just person who's full of bias to look at someone like Stalin. Like, I'd put Stalin up against any American leader in the last 40, 50 years, for sure. Obama, Bush, Trump, right? Biden. I'll put Stalin up against any of those guys, any day. So, I think that's my answer. Radio Halifax, good to see you, my man. John, have you cut back on the number of streams you do a week permanently? Yes, I stream Tuesdays. And there are lots of reasons for that. And I could go into those reasons if you like, but like, it really does essentially boil down to this stream was not gaining any momentum. I feel like it's been shadow banned into the earth. I don't think doing the extra streams was putting more information out there or enlightening anybody in a way. And at the end of the day, it was just ensuring that I couldn't do anything else. And so I think by cutting back on the streams, I'm able to redirect my time and my resources down alternative paths, such as music, right? So now I'm able to go out and actually do music. Or beekeeping is another one. I actually have this really great opportunity in front of me right now where I might be able to actually plant some hives and actually do something interesting. Yeah, and just simply write more revolutionary music. So I think that there's, and that's just kind of, so that's what's going on this end. That I want to be able to pursue more than just this live stream. And if the live stream was picking up steam and if I was gaining, followers every single, like if it was happening, I would feel a little bit differently about it. But then I also had the realization that, like, even if I wanted to put, because people will come in here and they'll say, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And it's like, because I don't have the time. Because I'm just doing the live stream. Like, why don't I make thumbnails? Why don't I do a nice edited video? Why don't I do, like, okay, great, when? So even if I want to, even if I wanted to do any of that stuff to improve the live stream, then I'd need to reduce the amount of live streams that I do. So that's what's going on. And I'm so grateful that you guys are still along for the journey with me. Seems like everybody's being quite supportive on that. So thank you so much. Rob Bob says, I only found the live stream from PLN. I feel like, oh yeah, that I did that. How nice. I did a, from, I'm definitely Positive Leftist News. I did one of their episodes for Positive Leftist News. And it was, I'm glad that I did that. That was great fun. And if it means that I ended up with one viewer, Rob Bob, it was all worth it, Rob Bob. Just for you. Just for you. That was a great time. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like, I don't know that I would have been able to do that if I had have maintained that schedule. So Stelino over on Twitch says, I want to be honest with you, but I really don't understand why people support communism in the Soviet Union after that experience. I was born in the Soviet Union. I live in Russia. I love history and objective. Okay, so, like, being born in the Soviet Union, like, I assume you're, like, my age. So that means that you were born during the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? And the Soviet Union collapses for lots of good reasons. So the idea that you experienced communism, no, you didn't. Like, just no, you didn't. Like, that the time period that I would describe as actually like a meaningful communist period in Russia at that time would easily be like 1910 to probably 1955, right? That's the time period that I would call genuinely communist. And you could push that out a little bit, and I think some people have. Like, there are people who have tried to make the argument that Khrushchev did do reform stuff and did move in a socialist manner, and that's fine. But really, like, you're looking at Lenin and Stalin. That's what you're really looking at. And if you're trying to tell me that, like, I was born in 1982 and all I know of the Soviet Union is its dismantling, its internal dismantling, thanks Gorbachev, then and that's how you define what communism is in your mind, yeah, I'd be against communism too if I did that. So when I think of communism in the Soviet Union, I think I just want to preface what I'm about to say by saying it is irrational to believe that the very first communist project would have been successful. Like, that's like saying the very first rocket we shot at space should have hit the moon. Like, it's just not right. Still no clarifies and says, I was born in 1989. Okay, right? So case in point. Before the before the revolution, right? Russia was a monarchy. It was run by Tsars, Tsar Nicholas II. He was literally running pogroms and kept sending his military into failed military adventurism against, like, Japan. Where they'd lose a whole bunch of people and then go home and basically be told, yeah, okay, well, that was fun, fuck off. And the average life expectancy amongst the peasantry is like 36. Like, when you are talking about something like communism, you're not talking about it in a vacuum. You're talking about it in the idea of what came before it. What came before it, what came after it. Right? Well, and the collapse of the Soviet Union ushered in a sharp decline of living standards. Child prostitution spreads throughout the land. Unemployment spreads throughout the land. So the collapse of the Soviet Union is a disaster for most Russians. But and so people who call themselves communists or Marxists or scientific socialists take a look at what the Bolsheviks are attempting to do, the Herculean feat of social reform and the Herculean feat of defeating a monarchy and then defending its revolution from people who wish to install themselves as a new ruling class, as a new monarchical class, which certainly existed in Russia. And there's this concept of defending the revolution, which is not an easy thing to do. And the Russians were the first people to try it. And so the idea that it was going to be completely 100% successful slam dunk is just not very reasonable. Gamer Jam chimes in, the goal needs to be to eliminate the class system. The whole reason rich people exist is because other people are exploited. That's sort of the end game, for sure. And a big criticism people have of modern day China is that they're not explicitly going against that within their own country. But I think that excludes an understanding of like how the capitalist system works as like a global system, right? Like China can't purge the bourgeois from its own society and then live in an isolated world from the United States. It's just not a real thing, right? That's just not a serious way of looking at the world. And so they've had to be agile and maneuverable. Still no said, and my grandpa was in World War II, or what you might call the Great Patriotic War, right? That's like, if there is ever such a thing as a just war, it is for sure the war that the Soviets fought against the Germans. For sure. The Nazis. And then you say, you mean in Soviet Union it's not pure communism? Okay, so, like, what you're talking about is a bit of Western propaganda or capitalist propaganda that has sort of crept into the conversation. Like, there is really no such thing as pure communism, right? Like, scientific socialists, Marxists, are not utopians. We don't hold to this utopian idea. The people who hold to the utopian idea of communism are capitalists, and they use that as a critique of communism. That communism is, as Frederick Engels articulated, it is the doctrine of the liberation of the proletariat. That it is the method by which the working class, the proletariat, frees itself from the class system. That the ownership class or the bourgeois own the means of production, and the workers should own the means of production. And there are a lot of theories about how to do that, what's the proper path to do that, how, can it be done even, and so the Russian idea, right, the Bolshevik idea of how to pursue this is through revolution and then erecting a series of Soviets, right? And ensuring that each of those Soviets is ruled by a workers' council. And that it's the workers' councils that have the true power in their countries. The issue that communists face and that communist societies face is an external threat. That's the major issue that communist societies face, is that anarchists especially will criticize communists because the goal is the abolition of the state, right? That's one of the stated goals that the Bolsheviks had and that communists generally have, is the abolition of the state. The state understood to be groups of armed men who defend the bourgeois, right? So the abolition of the state. Something like defund the police is something of a statement in that regard. But communists also acknowledge that you can't simply take over the state and then abolish it, because there are external factors. There are external countries, capitalist organizations, capitalist international organizations, and capitalist corporations will come in and literally destroy your country. And so you need to have a powerful and strong state to defend against that, which I think Stalin showed very clearly. The invasion by the Nazis was very clearly an attempt by capitalists to destroy a country that was rising up in ideological opposition to capitalism. And the Nazis attempted to destroy the Soviet Union for it. And the communists were able to win. I do make the argument that the Soviets defeated the Nazis, but fascism defeated communism. I think that definitely happened. Because after Stalin's death, it's very clear that within the Soviet Union, the spirit of communism is just not there anymore. They don't really have the chutzpah or the the spirit. They don't have it anymore. And that's how you end up with the Sino-Soviet split. And that's how you end up with sort of vapid leaders, ending with just like this vapid Gorbachev, who ends up betraying the entire thing by dismantling the Soviet Union, even though the people within the Politburo were voting in favor of maintaining the Soviet Union. So Still says, I leave after 2 years. I don't know what that's in reference to. Maybe there was a comment that didn't happen. You learned a lot about the archives in Russia, about the Soviet Union and all this stuff. Yet, Putin very recently opened up the archives, which was very clarifying. It really helped clarify, except for the Nazis and the fascists in the West. But for everybody else, it helped clarify what was going on during that period of time in the Soviet Union, especially in regards to things like the Holodomor. Okay, so you want to talk about the 1939 Ribbentrop and Molotov Pact, right? Stalin divided the world with the Austrian painter in that document. Nope, again, this is a very robust, like, Western propaganda tactic to try to, because it all boils down to the Nazis and the communists were the same, right? That's what it was. And so but when you actually look at what that pact actually was, it's essentially just basic diplomacy, right? And really what it tells you is that Westerners don't understand what diplomacy looks like, and that capitalists don't do diplomacy, right? But if you actually take a look at that period of time, everybody was making pacts with one another, because it's important to make pacts with one another, right? No, I'm describing you what that pact actually is, because what you're doing is you're isolating that document, removing it from its context, and then universalizing it and pretending like that's the only thing that was ever happening ever, and then saying that this was Stalin and Hitler signing a universal document that no one else was involved in and nothing else was going on. So it was like two evil geniuses grabbing hands and being like, ha 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 ha, we will split the world, ha 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 ha, like they're cartoon characters, right? Because you don't actually know anything else about what's going on around that document. But if you actually take a look at what was actually going on during that period of time, France was signing pacts with Germany, Britain was signing pacts with Germany, Italy was signing pacts, Spain was signing pacts, Poland was signing pacts. Why? Because everybody was jockeying for position, right? See, no, look, stop typing. Because you have definitely elevated this into your mind into a place that it doesn't belong in. Like, you have taken this document and you think it's a sacred document. And I'm here to tell you that it is a very mundane, very rote, very normal, extremely common document that literally every leader did with every single other leader, and it's for extremely good reasons, which I will tell you if you will listen. Right? The reason why you want to be making these kinds of documents is because each one of these documents is a declaration of intent to clarify what one nation will do in response to what another nation will do. This is extremely important to do in international politics. Let's bring up the map. When you get up to this level, right? International politics is inherently anarchic. There is no greater power. There's no one else that you can appeal to. And so there's only actually two things that people can look at to determine whether or not to trust you. Right? Trust is very difficult to gain and very difficult to maintain in an anarchic international political system, right? Because you don't know the intent of your neighbor. You don't know what the intent of your neighbors are. And so you're constantly trying to suss this out, right? You're trying to constantly suss out what is going on around you. And so what nations do is they make pacts with one another, and they make non-aggression pacts. That's what it actually is. Like, I know you're hung up on the word pact because you think that's a magic word of sacred quality, but it isn't. It's just a non-aggression agreement. And the reason why you make said arrangements is to build trust with your neighbors. If not the person that you made the agreement with, then definitely the people around you who see, oh, they made this deal, this side broke the deal, and this side responded in the manner that they said they would. So in the case of the Molotov Pact, right, the Soviet Union signs a non-aggression pact with Germany. And they say in that document that you haven't read, actually. That's the best part. You keep pretending like this is a sacred document, but you've never read it. They say explicitly in the document, if you invade Poland, right, then we will go into Poland as well. Right? Reminding everybody that this, the border between Poland and Belarus, is where the Soviet Union was. That the goal of the Soviet Union was to keep Poland a no man's land. To keep Poland neutral. They want Poland to be a neutral buffer state. That's very important in power politics, is to have a buffer state. That when you have a buffer state, you can have a great power on the other side of this buffer state and feel a little bit safer. And the purpose of the Molotov Pact, the non-aggression pact, is to simply say, look, if you cross into Poland, we, the Soviets, will take that as an act of war against ourselves. We will push into Poland, so we will not permit you to come up to our border for free. And we will push into Poland, and we will start the war in Poland. That it's not Stalin and Hitler dividing the world in this childish, ridiculous, this document is a sacred document that no one else did. It's very clearly adults sitting down in a room saying, okay, we need to make statements, state our intentions, so that not only us and not only our enemy, but also everybody else around us could see who broke what deal. And the people who break the deal are the Germans, right? They have a non-aggression pact with the Soviets. The deal is hands off Poland. If you go into Poland, we will meet you in Poland because we consider that an act of war against ourselves. Because we consider Poland to be neutral territory, a buffer state. And that if you encroach into Poland, we will consider that an act of war against ourselves. Germany broke the pact. So your entire narrative that this is somehow Stalin and Hitler making a plan behind the scenes in order to divide up the world. First of all, it's incoherent and it doesn't make any sense. It's just the most irrational, ahistorical stuff that anybody can say. Right? Literally read anything about the history of Nazism and the history of the Soviet Union, and you'll see that that's obviously the case. That Hitler was always seen as a primary antagonist to the Soviet Union. Always. 100% of the time. Like, for God's sakes, just read Mein Kampf. Like, the first people that the Germans rounded up were the communists. Like, you think Stalin's looking at that and just being like, Hayekels, what an ally. Yeah, he'll definitely be a trustworthy and stalwart person to divide the world in two. It's incoherent. It doesn't make any sense. Only a stupid person would continue believing it. Especially when you have, like, a very reasonable argument for why people would sign these documents. Why would the French sign a document with Germany? Why would the British sign a document with Germany? Why would the Hungarians and the Slovakians and the Romanians and the Italians, like, why would they sign these documents? because they're looking for assurances. And in a state of war, you need as much order as you can get so that everybody kind of understands where everybody stands and how much trust can you actually put in to certain people. What documents they signed can you show me? You want me to do your research for you? I mean, do I have that at my fingertips? Hold on. Let's see if I have that. I know that there is a Wikipedia article that basically has the list of all the documents that these people were signing. Do I have it? Just give me a second, guys. I've definitely seen this. Not right in front of my face. Hold on. Molotov Pact. Hold on. Other pacts signed during that time. Yeah, they're just going to talk about that. They're just going to talk about that. There's a reason why the West wants you to pretend like it's the only thing that was going on during that time. Yeah, I don't have it at my fingertips right now. If somebody in the chat wants to find that for me. Oh yeah, Radio Halifax. That's true, actually. Most of those agreements are listed in the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Yeah. William L. Shire. Which, by the way, William L. Shire is absolutely... the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Required reading for the subject. Like... that's the reason why I find this conversation so distasteful, because it's so just separate from anything. Like, you have to have like a Marvel movie idea of how the world actually works, that any agreement made by anyone towards anyone it automatically makes everyone evil, because there's only good and there's only evil and there's nothing between them, and reality doesn't exist. You have to actually just like buy into the idea that there are only gods and there are only devils, and it just doesn't make sense. It's completely incoherent. People have to do what they've got to do during high periods. David's, good to see you. Hello, Mr. Kami. Hello to you. Hope you're doing well. Just trying to remember where the heck that was. Wikipedia article, pacts during World War II, signed agreements. The Munich Agreement, Paris Peace Treaties. What is, but I mean, you can see the Four Power Agreement on Berlin, the Tripartite Pact. Like, the trouble is that there's so much propaganda surrounding that specific thing, because they're trying to convince you to remain unintelligent, essentially. I mean, the Anglo-Soviet Agreement, the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, the Anglo-Polish Alliance, the German-Soviet Credit Agreement, Canadian-United States Automotive Product Agreement. Like, these sorts of deals are being signed all the time. Oh, maybe I could just look at this. Oh, here you go. Yeah. Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Turkey all signed a non-aggression pact in 1938. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia all signed 1938. The French, here you go. The French Third Republic and Nazi Germany signed a non-aggression pact in 1938. The Kingdom of Denmark and Germany signed a non-aggression pact in 1939. The Republic of Estonia and Nazi Germany, 1939. Nazi Germany and Latvia, 1939. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. There's the one that you've got your panties in a bunch about. Nazi Germany signed a a non-aggression pact with Turkey. I guess that makes Turkey Nazis now. Yugoslavia and Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact. Right? The French signed a non-aggression pact with Thailand. So, like, I guess this makes Estonia, Latvia, and the French Nazis, according to you. Right? That's your logic. Which I don't take very seriously at all. Right? Oh, Japan and not the Nazis signed one. Nazi Germany and the Second Polish Republic. So I guess I don't know why they've got the wrong flag here. I guess at this time this was the flag. So the Polish are, I guess, Nazis in your view. Right? Like, there it is. Nazi Germany, Second Polish Republic. So the Polish are Nazis to you. Makes sense. And meanwhile, here's the Soviet Union also signing a non-aggression pact with the Polish. Right? So either all of these people are Nazis. So the French, the Polish, the Estonians, the Latvians are all Nazis. Or as bad as Nazis. Or the explanation that I've given is the most rational explanation. That you want to be making deals with your neighbors in order to build trust and also establish a sense of order. A moment where you say, if you do this, I will respond this way. So that everybody around you can see you respond in the way that you said you were going to respond. During periods of war, any kind of predictability that you can build is good, especially after the war is over. Right? Because then people can say, well, they made this pact. They said, if you abide by the pact, then we'll maintain the pact. But if you break the pact, we will do this, which is exactly what the Soviets did. Nakedly and openly. You can read the pact yourself. If Germany encroaches into Poland, Soviet Union will respond by encroaching into Poland and meet the Germans in Poland to fight the war, which is what happened. And like, you want people to be making these deals. And what I'm trying not to get frustrated while having this particular conversation, but it's frustrating because it's so clear that Westerners just don't even attempt to understand what diplomacy is, right? Or why, or even understand why it's important to engage in diplomacy. Like, you absolutely should be engaging in diplomacy all the time. You should be signing deals. You should be making statements. You should be making pacts. You should be saying very clearly, these are my intentions. These are my red lines. This is what I expect moving forward. This is what I say. The trouble with this conversation is that Westerners do not understand what diplomacy is. That diplomacy in the mind of a Westerner is going into a country, dictating terms, and if they don't abide by your terms, overthrowing their government and murdering their citizens. That's diplomacy in the West. That's the settler colonial mindset, right? Of just white supremacy, not just white supremacy, dominance, and control. And diplomacy is us telling you what to do. Well, for most of the world's history, in most of the world, there is a thing called diplomacy, where you say, you draw up papers and you draw up agreements and you draw up statements and you say, look, this is our expectations. We are going to operate as if there is a non-aggression pact. We feel things have escalated to a point where we have to make statements of non-aggression, but we understand that you might be aggressive, and so if you aggress past these red lines, so in the case of the Molotov Pact, the red line is Poland, right? It's the Polish border. So if you encroach into Poland, we will take that as a breaking of the pact and a declaration of war against us. You absolutely want these things stated. Not just, and fundamentally, you know who you really make those agreements for? For your own army. For your own military. So that you can, as the leader of the Soviet Union, you can show your army, we've made a non-aggression pact. We've said the border of Poland is off limits. Should the Nazis cross into Poland, then you, Russians, my men, my soldiers, my military personnel, are in a state of war. And it isn't me going in to invade Poland and destroy everything because I'm a madman. It's us as a people responding to the threat of the Nazis breaking this pact. You absolutely want to be signing these documents. And the childish idea, the absolutely childish idea that this agreement was Stalin and Hitler sitting down and being like, we're both madmen and we're going to split Poland in two. You got to be a baby to think that way. Like, really. And if you persist in that way, all I'm going to say to you from now on is just grow up. Because that's all this is. It's just baby brain shit. It's just Westerners refusing to acknowledge the existence of diplomacy and the existence of why these things would be good to sign for your own people to understand an order in the face of an overwhelming chaos. Right? You absolutely want to be signing these agreements and these documents. You absolutely want to be doing that. I don't click on links in the chat, buds, so if you've got a question, you can go ahead and answer. Thank you for your service. Writes, you can't make a deal with a tiger with your head in its mouth. I think I've laid out pretty cleanly why it's a good idea to sign a pact like this for your own citizens. To understand, yeah, okay, we're going to war. Right? Like the idea that Stalin could just like clap his hands and have 100,000, 1 million people, 2 million people just throw themselves into a meat grinder. It's just dumb. Right? The people of Russia need to understand that there's a threat, that there's a actual threat, and the Nazis are a very clear threat, and they need to know what the lines are. What should we expect? And so Stalin signs a document to show his own people and go, there are the lines. If they cross Poland, we're at war. And the people of Russia go, okay, those are the terms. We understand. And so the Nazis cross the line. And the Russians go, okay, we're at war. And what do? Exactly what they said they would do. So please, let's do away with this babyish notion. The Polish campaign of the Red Army, Google it. No, I know the Polish campaign of the Red Army. I understand. The Polish were aligning themselves with Nazi Germany. I have nothing. That's the end of the conversation. Like, fuck around and find out. Like, I don't know why I'm supposed to have sympathy for Nazis. I don't. So I hope that that's sort of put the nail in the coffin on this. I hope. Because I feel like what's happening now is that we're just running into your biases. Right? And the question is whether or not you can accept evidence and accept reasonable argument. And 40% of the society can't. And I'm used to that. I'm used to talking to people fairly regularly who just refuse to acknowledge the existence of evidence, who don't respond to evidence any longer, who are not capable or interested in responding to evidence. I just ban those people. Because it's just like you either respond to evidence or you don't. Like the earth is flat or round, right? And if I can show you that it's round, then you better say it's round. Like, and if this whole conversation is just going to be a series of denials, I don't know why I bother continuing. Like, just please just go worship the CIA. Like, this is the funny part about it. Like, it's like there's an entire terrorist organization in the world called the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, that exists exclusively to terrorize the world's population and lie to them. And yet, for some reason, everybody acts like that organization doesn't exist or isn't interested in its mandate, its stated objective, which is lying to everybody and causing as much disorder as possible and overthrowing as many governments as they can. Like, and it's like people will regurgitate the same CIA talking points over and over and over and over and over again, and then act surprised that anybody would not just go along with these obvious, overt lies that are perpetrated by an organization that exists specifically to lie to you. And it's just amazing how often it happens. Like, it's pretty stunning how often like, I'll finally talk someone into a position where they'll be like, oh, I guess it's a bit more complicated than I originally thought, right? And then immediately they're just down another CIA rabbit hole. And it's like, God, we just went through this, bud. Like, I just showed you. Like, I just walked you through how the West will just bullshit you. They'll just lie to you. And they'll, like, take a look at the Molotov conversation we just had, right? It's just a bullshit, dead-brained, stupid lie. Stalin and Hitler carved up Poland and invaded it together as allies. Yeah. That's so stupid. There's just overwhelming evidence against that claim and literally no evidence to support that claim. And, like, literally France made the same deal. I guess France is just full of Nazis now. And I'll finally get somebody talked off that, because it's such a stupid position that you can't actually maintain it once you think about it. And then immediately it's just a pivot into another dumb thing. And it's all just an organization designed to lie to you, lying to you, and you just buying it because you're gullible. I'm like, sorry, I'm like balling pretty hard right now, but it gets frustrating because it's over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm just astounded at how people like want to be gullible. They want to be gullible. They want to buy into it, right? They want to believe that, but it's so odd to see somebody from Russia buying into it. Like, that's really weird, right? Usually it's just some guy from Texas, right? Just some guy from Florida or something who wants to believe that his country is good when it's not. Like, America's not capable of being good. It's never been good. This whole make America great again, what are you talking about? When was America ever great? Ever. Like, America's powerful, certainly. So? Eggs D writes, it has to be just bigotry at this point. Bigotry is too hard, though, I think. I definitely think a bit of that exists, Eggs D. I don't want to even correct you on that, but, like, I definitely bias. Definitely just a bias of, like, my country is good. And it has to be. It's the same. I've talked about this all the time. That part of the process of growing up and maturing is acknowledging that your parents are fallible and are just people, right? They're not gods and they're not devils, right? Your dad is not a perfect superhuman worthy of eternal adoration, nor is he like a demonic narcissist, only interested in himself, right? And he's just a complicated person, and people are complex figures, and the things that you thought were important when you were growing up, he didn't think were important, right? Or that the things that stuck in your mind are just things that he's forgotten about. And so it's just like a big part of growing up is just saying, okay, my parents are just people trying their best in difficult circumstances. And the same logic holds true of countries, that your country is not good. It's not this holy kind of thing. And if it acts in a way that is evil, you should probably point that out and be like, I don't want my country acting that way in the world. I don't want that to be my representative. I don't want that to be how I'm represented in the world. But if all you're going to do is try to justify shitty actions, which at this point is unjustifiable, there's just no way to do it anymore. Unless you're just like completely bought in and you're just on the Death Star and you're pushing the button and blowing up the planet and being like, that planet was blown up for the glory of the Empire. And it makes total sense and is completely logical. Like, if you're actually like trying to grow up and trying to become a stronger person in the world, then the way to do that is to give up on this idea that the place you live in is good just because it gave birth to you. David writes, I am from Germany, and my country is definitely good. I mean, Germany is denying citizenship to people who share, like, or comment on From the River to the Sea slogan. So Germany's kind of on the path back to where it always came from, right? Germany's so weird, though, this way, right? Like, if you deny the Holocaust, we'll deny your citizenship. But if you acknowledge the Holocaust that's happening in Israel, we'll deny your citizenship. It's just sort of odd. I think Germany, I said it earlier and I'll say it again, I think Germany's just returning to where it always has been, right? That eventually the United States, like Donald Trump said it out loud, and there's lots of people in the U.S. that thinks this way. Why are we funding a military to protect Europe? They should fund their own militaries. Okay, cool. So Germany will rearm itself, and then it'll do the thing that it's always done, right? Like Germany attacking its neighbors that's not a new thing, right? That's how they've always behaved, right? I don't see why all of a sudden, if they got a military today, they would act any differently. It's just sort of weird, you know? Like, it's just odd that it's always like it is this powerful force that exists in our world, which is nationalism. Nationalism is an incredibly powerful force. And it's as powerful as our connection to our family. That, like, I feel like the show Married with Children captured something really fundamental about the human experience, which is that the Bundys kind of hate each other, right? Al and Peggy and Bud and the daughter, whose name escapes me, they're always arguing with one another and they're always fighting, right? And they kind of hate one another, you know? They certainly don't really like being around one another. They're always looking for excuses to get separated from one another. They drive each other crazy. But if anybody outside the family offends one of the family members, then the entire family rallies and attacks that person. So there's this like real sense of like community and comradeship that exists within the family, even though they're constantly sniping at one another. And I think the same thing holds true for nations. That you'll have a lot of infighting in a nation, but if an external threat occurs, the nation will rally against that threat. Persian Prince 2. I'm from the Middle East, Iran actually. What do you think the recent changes in the region? I mean, it's an intense moment right now, for sure. It's an intense moment right now. I'll say this about Iran, okay? I think Iran has handled itself beautifully in the last 20, 30 years. Literally, they watched Iraq get destroyed. There's that border. The Kuwait War happened right there. There's the border of Iran, right? Afghanistan got destroyed around the same period of time. Hey, look at that border, right? Isn't that crazy how there's this border here where this country was destroyed and then there's a border here where this country was destroyed? And you've got intelligence coming out and just public statements. Forget about intelligence, just public statements. Like Wesley Clark's statement about how, yeah, we're going to go in there, we're going to destroy Iraq, we're going to destroy Afghanistan, we're going to destroy Syria, and then we're going to finish it up with Iran. Well, I think the Iranians took that to heart. I don't think that they had leadership during that period of time that were just like, oh, I guess, things will just unfold the way that they'll unfold. Doopity-doopity-doopity-doo. Right? Yeah, Libya. Libya's a big one, if you ask me. Because Libya was just like kind of out in left field. They didn't have a Cassius Belli. At least with the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions, they manufactured a Cassius Belli. And for those who don't know, a Cassius Belli is a justification for the war, right? And these are important because you need to have some kind of justification to get people to go along with it. June, good to see you. Good to see you, June. And you know what? Checkmate, June. Gaddafi was a dictator. Checkmate. Got it. No, they didn't have a Cassius Belli. They just destroyed Libya. And that's scary. That's deeply, deeply, deeply scary. People will often criticize Iran because it is essentially a theocracy. It's a militant theocracy. My take on that is during periods of war, you want the people who are most willing to pick up weapons and shoot those weapons to be in charge. And you also want the people who are most dedicated to protecting your culture in place. And who are those people? Militant theocrats. There's just no getting away from it, right? That if you want to ensure that Iran is not run by militant theocrats, then end the war, right? End the war, and then in a couple of decades, the people themselves will be like, I don't know about this militant theocracy. I don't know about this anymore. Yeah, why don't we do something else? Yeah, that's how that'll go. But if you invade the region, destroy the two countries beside it, and start invasions and destruction all around in the region, don't be too fucking surprised if the people that take power are the people who are most dedicated to shooting guns and holding the Quran. Yeah, I think the Persian Prince is kind of nailing the statement, which is, I don't support our dictator, but he was wise about keeping our country safe somehow. That's it. That's the statement. If you don't have security, you don't got nothing, right? And if the people who are willing to ensure the security of your country during legitimate periods of actual duress are militant theocrats, okay. Like, well, you think some soft-hearted liberal is going to be the guy? Like, dude, they fucking went into... They straight up just hung Saddam, right? They were like dropping cruise missiles on dust huts in Afghanistan. They literally shoved a sword up Gaddafi's ass on national television, and then Hillary Clinton cackled about it. Yeah. So the fact that Iran, and now, because of all of these decisions and because of all of the position that Iran has put itself in, Iran has actually become the looming threat against Israel during its period of genocide and expansionism. Because what the Zionists are trying to do right now is they're trying to expand into Lebanon, right? The reason they wanted to destroy Syria is because they want to expand and take over Damascus. They want to take over Jordan, and they want to take over the Suez Canal, right? There's a project called the Greater Israel Project. It's really easy to find, right? And it is all about expanding the borders of Israel and creating a Greater Israel so that they can claim more resources and more territory and seize deeper control. The United States really wants full control of the Suez Canal. They have soft control of the Suez Canal, but they really want full control of the Suez Canal. And they'll get the way they'll get that full control is by expanding the borders of Israel. They also want control of the Gulf of Aqaba, the Gulf of the Suez, obviously. They want control of all of this, right? So that the Saudi Arabians can't build any projects or do anything. Like, they want these slivers of land, is what they want. And that's all going to get wrapped up into Israel. So, during this period of expansion, if the United States have been successful in destroying Iran, then there isn't really any force in the Middle East that could, like, Hezbollah would not be able to check Israel, right? They wouldn't have this missile campaign happening in Israel that happened today, which is insane, right? It's absolutely insane what's going on in Israel now. And meanwhile, the Saudi Arabians are just the Machiavellian evil geniuses that they've always been. Just literally ending up on the right side of history, doing the right things. Woke CIA drone pilot says, "We are Marxists here. We don't support religious regimes in and of themselves. We only support Iran in its fight against the greater devils of Israel and the United States." I think that's basically kind of it. That's the statement. June, you wrote something a little while ago, and I'm going to read it. To say then that power is a neutral value, having a potential for right or wrong, depending on how it is employed, is to overlook the fact that power may generate its own propensities and imperatives. Yeah, Michael Parenti, The Anti-Communist Impulse. So hopefully that answers your question, Persian Prince. Yeah. I wish I didn't play such hardball with that other fella. He was asking genuine questions. It just gets to be a bit much, you know, like, and really, I just, like, I know I already went through it, but I'm going to go through it again. It's like, you're really genuinely trying to tell me that there's this, like, cartoonish agreement, like, as if they're capable of carving up the planet. Drives me crazy. Anyway. So, because the majority of Canadians don't see themselves as settlers, you end up with articles like this coming out of the Fraser Institute, which is an organization that I'm like, we should shut this place down for sure. No evidence of mass graves or genocide in residential schools. So, this is straight genocide denial coming out of the Fraser Institute now. Now, let me be clear about one thing. They do have something of a point in that there was a hubbub that was made about 2 or 3 years ago now in Canada about we found what they called mass unmarked graves, but it ended up being like a zealous media campaign kind of creating a hysteria. In my view, it's an indictment of our media culture more than anything else, that instead of actually saying, hey, somebody thinks that they found something or they think they might have discovered something and then following that up in a more serious way, they didn't do any of that. And so now it's turned into, there never was a genocide. This article, of course, goes down a real, what's my favorite part? You know what? I'm just going to read this. Just to infuriate all of us. On May 27th, 2021, Roseanne Casimir, chief of the Tek-Em Loops Te Sekwempemek, Kamloops Indian Band, announced that ground-penetrating radar had located the remains of 215 missing children in an apple orchard on the site of a former residential school. Politicians and media seized on the announcement, and stories of mass unmarked graves and burials of missing children ricocheted around Canada and indeed much of the world. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau set the tone of the public response by ordering Canadian flags to be flown at half-mast on all federal buildings to honor the 215 children whose lives were taken at the Kamloops residential school, thus elevating the possible burials to the status of victims of foul play and making Canada sound like a carnal house of murdered children. So let's be real clear. The residential school system was a system in which the RCMP and the Catholic Church kidnapped children from First Nations people and put them into residential schools. We have straight up eyewitness testimonies of people who were sent by the Parliament saying that the place is riddled with tuberculosis, that children were dying without a doubt, that these places are just shitty cesspools while they attempt to culturally eradicate, literally kill the Indian kind of stuff, right? That's what the residential school system is. And that's what makes this article so frustrating, is that even if the mass grave claim ends up being false, it doesn't change what the residential school system was, right? It still is a system of cultural eradication where children were literally kidnapped from First Nations people on reserves that they were put on because of the Indian Act. Like, I'm from Manitoba. This is well understood. These schools closed. The last residential school in Manitoba closed the same year that The Lion King was in theaters. According to Canadian newspaper editors, the discovery of the so-called unmarked graves was the news story of the year, and the World Press Photo of the Year award went to a haunting image of red dresses hung on crosses along a roadside, with a rainbow in the background, commemorating children who died at residential schools created to assimilate Indigenous children in Canada. Right? It's a very emotional thing. Even the accusation, even the bringing up of the residential schools, I think is a very emotional thing, especially for liberals in Canada. Of course, our hard-right conservatives are trying to deny the entire thing happened. These events created a narrative about the genocidal nature of residential schools. Note, the residential schools were genocidal in nature. We literally have the votes, which were established in the 19th and 20th centuries by churches and the government, the RCMP, to educate Indigenous children and assimilate them into Canadian society. Right. To eliminate their culture. Right? Like, we have the documents. Like, we have the statements that were made. They were, the churches and the government created these residential schools by kidnapping children. And then to, quote-unquote, educate them and assimilate them into Canadian society. Right, by killing the Indian. Right? This isn't like people voluntarily went to these schools to learn English. Right? Like, these were mass kidnappings. That narrative went unchallenged at first, yet substantial pushback gradually developed amongst a group of retired judges, lawyers, professors, journalists, and others who have had careers in researching and evaluating the evidence that supports their biases. It's no accident that most are retired, because that gives them some protection against attempts to silence them as deniers. Right. Like, right. So the very people who would be deniers are. In the words of Janis Joplin, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Like, what a loser this author is, man. Janis Joplin's literally writing those words about poor people rebelling against a system that's abandoned them. And here this author is using these words for retired judges to do genocide denial. I published a book which has been an Amazon Canada bestseller, proving Canadians' desire for accurate information on this topic that confirms their bias. The book is a collection of some of the best pushback essays published in response to the Kamloops mythology. Right? Don't you love this? Kamloops mythology. Like, literally, we have the statements in Parliament. They analyze and critique the false narrative of unmarked graves, missing children, forced attendance, and genocidal conditions at residential schools. The book's title, Grave Error, summarizes the author's view of the Kamloops narrative. It is wrong, and not just wrong, but egregiously wrong. It deserves our sardonic title, and our book shows in detail just why and where the narrative is wrong. Your sardonic title makes you look like a goof, an unserious person, right? Like, you're selling books. That's all you're doing, right? You're just selling books to gullible people who want to believe their country is good. Several of these authors, as well as others who have helped research and edit these publications, had for many years been writing for major metropolitan dailies, national magazines, academic journals, university press. I love how he has this laundry list, as if we didn't just read an article from Gerard Baker, which is essentially Nazi propaganda in the Wall Street Journal. Oh, important establishment. There's no history of bias or simply denial within established media. That's never existed. However, they quickly learned that the corporate, legacy, or mainstream media, in addition to religious leaders and politicians, have little desire to stand up to the narrative flow of a moral panic. Yes, acknowledging reality. That's a moral panic. They thus wrote about the residential schools mainly in specialized journals such as the Dorchester Review, online daily media such as True North and the Western Standard, and online journals such as Unheard and History Reclaimed, whose raison d'etre is to challenge conventional wisdom. All of those things that he just listed are extremely far-right, like, in many cases, Nazi-adjacent journals. Straight up. Here's your free speech for you. You get free speech, you end up with this goofy shit. For example, the first essay, In Kamloops Not One Body Has Been Found, by Montreal historian Jacques Rouillard, has done more than any other single publication to punch holes in the false narrative of unmarked graves and missing children. Other essays punch more holes. Academic provocateur France Widdowson shows how the legend of murdered children and unmarked graves was spread by defrocked United Church minister Kevin Annett before it popped up at Kamloops. Retired Professor Jaime Rubenstein and collaborators examined the quote-unquote evidence of unmarked graves, such as the result of the GPR, and find there's nothing. Repeat, nothing there. Journalist Jonathan Kay explains how the media got the story completely wrong, generating the worst fake news in Canadian history. Retired Professor Ian Gentles examines health conditions in the schools and shows that children were better off there than at home on reserves. I love this. Health conditions in the school were better in this genocide than in the other genocide that we were doing. Right, where we rounded up all the First Nations people and put them on reserves. We threw them off their land and put them on reserves. And so the health conditions in our residential schools were better than in the other genocide. My contribution criticizes the prolific but weak body of research purporting to show that attendance at residential schools created a historical trauma that's responsible for social pathologies in Indigenous communities. Right, you're trying to blame Indigenous people for... it's just exactly the same thing that Nazis do to black people in the United States. Right? They're just weaker. Right? Retired Professor Rodney Clifton recounts from personal experience how benign conditions could be in residential schools, and other essays explore other fallacies. Yeah, you just need to ignore all the evidence, right? And then you can say what you like. I just don't know if I want to continue with this. It's just literally like, ignore the evidence, we're good. It's just so frustrating that, like, I'm reading article after article of our mainstream sources and I love that the Fraser Institute considers itself like a fringe. Like, literally, this has ties to former prime ministers. Like, and we're all just supposed to kind of go along with it. And it's just frustrating that we live in this environment where the most powerful publications and the most powerful organizations are doing everything they can to just discredit themselves and doing everything they can to just make sure that nobody else's voice can get heard, while they themselves complain about how they are the ones that are getting censored. It's just this asinine, ongoing, dumb bullshit situation. And it's so tiresome. Because it's so pathetic. It's just so ongoingly pathetic that instead of actually trying to say, okay, well, maybe we got this one wrong here, maybe this was inaccurate, maybe this was less about the accuracy of the physical evidence and more about people's emotional response to it, to the actual genocide that definitely did happen. Like, imagine calling the residential school anything short of a genocide, while the very people who set the residential school up outright said on paper that we can read, we're doing this to kill the Indian and to make sure that culture dies. It's just brutal. It's just this brutal, like, desire to maintain this absolute harrowingly absurd position that our country is actually good. We were actually good. Like, at some point, it's just not that much different than saying, Daddy wouldn't lie. Yes, he would, sweetie. Yeah, woke writes, real colonialism wasn't so bad vibes. Yeah, they're better off, right? They were all just living in mud huts in the first place, right? They're better off now, of course. All right, I want to pivot away from that, and I'm going to read this, and I think that we're going to close on this, unless something exciting happens in the chat. Oh, this is a very long article, actually. It's a very long article. I didn't realize how long this article was. You know what, though? Let's you know what I like to do when it comes to long articles like this? Let's read the opening and the closing. Right? This is how the US lost the solar power race to China, by David Fickling for Bloomberg Opinion. It all starts with a crystal. To make the solar cells that are projected to become the world's biggest source of electricity by 2031, you first melt down sand until it looks like chunks of graphite. Next, you refine it until impurities have been reduced to just one atom out of every 100 million, a form of elemental silicon known as polysilicon. It's so vital to the production of solar panels that it can be likened to crude oil's role in making gasoline. The polysilicon is then drawn out in the vast crystal, resembling a Jeff Koons steel sculpture of a sausage, before being sliced into salami-thin wafers. These are then treated, printed with electrodes, and finally sandwiched between glass. Okay, long-winded. Yeah. The 7 decades since tell the remarkable story of how America squandered its invention of solar photovoltaics, or PV, to the point where it will never recover. As recently as 2010, a small town in central Michigan was the world's biggest producer of solar polysilicon. Nowadays, the U.S. is barely in the game, and more than 90% of the total comes from China. That country's clean technology exports threaten to significantly harm American workers, businesses, and communities, President Joe Biden said May 14th, announcing 50% tariffs on Chinese solar cells. Man, if the answer to this question is just we're a bunch of fucking morons, right? Like, that's all it is. Solar keeps getting cheaper. Years of trade frictions hasn't stopped the price of polysilicon from falling, right? Which is the problem. You can't make any money on solar power, right? You can't meter the sun. 2/3 of new electricity generating capacity is solar power. New installations minus retirements. Photovoltaic, fossil fuels. That's actually kind of hopeful. I like that a lot. Let's just scroll right down to the bottom of this thing. I'm going to actually read this article. This is sort of a weak close to the show, but whatever. Such is life. If America wants a sort of small batch artisan solar sector to give the impression it's doing the work of staving off climate change, while going all in on expanding petroleum production instead, then it's hit on the right policy. U.S. manufacturers can survive in the walled garden on the domestic market, but the protectionism that sustains them means they'll never grow efficient and cheap enough to survive the savage competition of the global market. That's where Chinese companies reign supreme. China really wanted the solar industry, said Hemlock's former president Beachy. We gave that away as a country. It's a tragic failure of vision and ambition. In Detroit, a century ago, U.S. automobile entrepreneurs created an industry that irrevocably transformed cities, countries, and economies. This time around, China's innovators are the ones changing the world. Yeah, the U.S. is not interested in clean energy. Well, look, there's your capitalist innovation, right? Because they're just trying to make as much money as possible. That's all. They don't care about anything else. They just want the money. So it just flows right into what I've always said on this channel. It's just about worship. It's about worshiping money. It's about worshiping the self, and it's about worshiping their chaos system. That's what it's about. That they consider their shitty little free market to be innate and natural. And so it's just social Darwinism writ large. Like, forget about sitting down and having a conversation about it. Forget about making decisions, even though it's like obviously the best way forward. Well, we've reached the end of this one, I think. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.